Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. And boy, do we have an interesting show for you this time. It's kind of like two shows in one, two concepts rolled together in one show. Um, I decided to do a new concept called The Beatles, The Tough Questions. And what that is that I'm going to ask my panel here some questions that are extremely tough. In fact, they're so tough that there are no right answers or wrong answers. There's only opinions. And I'm sure that you've come across this when you've talked to other friends who are Beatle fans. There's some things you'll never know the answer to. So I figured I would torture these four guests of mine by bringing up these questions and having them rattle their brains and then being more frustrated because there are no real answers here. But anyway, let me welcome my panel. My goodness, four Beatles scholars here all at once. And coincidentally, without my planning it, they all write for Beatlefan magazine. How do you like that?
How do you like that?
Hmm.
First of all, we have Al Sussman, who's been with Beatlefan since almost the very beginning. He's also the author of the book Changin Times, 101 Days That Shaped a Generation. And for many years, he was part of the Things We Said Today co-hosts. And yeah, and Al and I go way back
Hmm.
as well as with Tom, because
Yes.
the
Yeah.
two of you used to be guests on my radio show in New Jersey on WDHA on Sunday mornings. It
Hmm.
was always great. It really was the start of Beatle podcasting, I think, right there.
Yeah,
The roots.
yeah.
The
You
roots
know,
of
when
it
people
all.
when people ask, Ken, how long we've been doing this, I answer too long.
Yeah.
Yes. If
Little
you're,
int we got the honeymooner reference out of the way. Okay, now we're
Right.
done.
I'm sure there's going to be more though.
Yeah.
But Al, great to have you back.
Thank you, sir.
We also
And
have, yeah,
and good to join my distinguished company here.
yeah, and it's just nice that for this particular show that you're all writers for Beatlefan. And I really didn't plan it that way. But anyway, Allan Kozinn is with us. You know him from the Things We Said Today show, also because he is one of the co-authors of the more than excellent McCartney Legacy series, parts one and two,
Hmm.
with Adrian Sinclair. And he also goes back to other Beatle books that he's written, From the Cavern to the Rooftop and Got That Something, How I Want to Hold Your Hand Changed Everything. Good to have you back, Alan.
Thanks, Ken. Great to be here
And
with
Bruce
these guys.
Spizer. Bruce Spizer is with us. If you don't know who Bruce is, you're in the wrong place, as
You're in
Ringo
the
would
wrong
say.
venue. Yeah.
There aren't too many people who have written more Beatle books than Bruce. He's written about everything, the Beatles on Capitol Records, on VJ, on Swan. He's done a whole series on all their albums, British and American. And we're going to have to cajole him into starting a new project on the Beatles.
Mm.
Let's see if we can. But Bruce, welcome back.
Well, I'm glad to be here and kind of like I said, enjoying a little bit of a vacation from. I did a book a year for 9 years, so I think I've earned some time off.
Okay. No one's arguing with that, but at some point, you always have to come back.
All
Mm.
right.
You know that. You never leave the Beatles.
No, you don't.
You
You
always
don't leave
come
the
back.
Beatles.
Yes. And of course, we got Tom Frangione, who's been a guest here on this channel many times, sometimes with Al, sometimes with Bruce. This is the first time all four of you have been together on the
Mhm.
channel.
I think so. Yeah.
But Tom, for many years with Beatlefan, and he's involved with so many shows on the Beatles channel on Sirius XM. I think the count now is 42 different shows that you're a co-host on.
Something like that. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And I'm Tom's agent, and they're going to now name it the Frangione Channel just to clean
Mhm.
Okay.
things up.
Yeah, we've been having, I mean, I couldn't turn the thing off today. We had such great McCartney programming all day. I actually had to close the door in my office. There was something called his 20 greatest bass lines. I mean, that's how deep we went.
Okay.
So,
Oof.
I mean, it was great stuff. So, glad to bring all that, here, particularly on this very celebrated day on the Beatle calendar.
Hmm.
That's right. And I did say at the start of the show that this is more like two shows in one, because since we're doing this on Paul's birthday, I figured we'd end the show by asking my guests about their favorites among singles and albums and what they think of the new album, The Boys of Dungeon Lane.
Hmm.
All right. So, are we ready to start with the tough questions?
Giddy up.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, we're going to start with a question that so many of us have been pondering through the years. If Brian Epstein hadn't died, how would that have changed the course of history with the Beatles, if at all? Would they still have broken up no matter what? Would they have stayed together a little bit longer? Would they have stayed together and tried to have solo careers simultaneously? Or would nothing have changed at all? Would it have just ended exactly the same? The one thing that we have to bring up here, one thing for sure is there's no Alan Klein in the picture.
Mm.
And that's a big factor.
Mm.
So if Brian hadn't died, what do you think would have been the outcome? Would the
Okay.
trajectory have changed?
Depending how many tough questions we have, we should probably rotate who goes first each time to get in the
Mm.
hot seat. So why don't you
Okay.
pick who you want to go round the horn with?
Well, I also know from working with Alan that he doesn't like to give the same answer as other people. So
Well,
it always
that's
helps
the whole,
to
yeah.
have him
There
go
you
on
go.
first so that he doesn't change his mind.
Okay.
So, Alan, why don't you answer this first?
Okay, it's a pretty complicated question because you also have to factor into that what Brian's state of mind in 1967 would have been.
Mhm.
Brian in 1967 was pretty much a different guy than he was in 1962.
Hmm.
He and part of that people theorize was because he was terrified that the Beatles wouldn't renew their contract when it ended, shortly after that, shortly after he died. There was question about whether they would continue because his main job for them at that point was putting them on tour, which they weren't going to do anymore. So let's posit first that Brian would have gotten it together personally,
Hmm.
gotten himself back to, weaned himself off various substances he was taking and got himself back to the sort of managerial headset that he had in 1962. He would have had to come to them and say, okay, look, you're not touring, but you still have quite an enterprise to run. And here are my ideas for things you can be doing. And, in other words, they would have been taking more of the reins, assuming that they would have signed the contract and continued with him. I think, the one thing in favor of that is that I think they recognized, at least eventually, when they were running Apple, that they were not businessmen
Hmm.
and they had actually better things to do, for themselves, leave the business to someone else. And that would have been Brian. And that would have helped a lot. And as you say, there would have been no Alan Klein. So Alan Klein was, a major catalyst in them breaking up because Paul was dead set against having Alan Klein, and the other three were for Alan Klein, but I think the only one that was really enthusiastic was John.
Hmm.
Mhm.
The others just went along because John made a good case for them, and Paul was unable to make the opposite case for some reason. And this is partly Mick Jagger's fault
Hmm.
because uh, he first said Alan Klein was great and he got us this and got us that. And then he went to them and said, yeah, but we've just found out that he now owns all of our recordings, and
Hmm.
and the Stones weren't happy about that. And Paul knew about that and could not convince John of it, you know. So so there's that. But anyway, in your theoretical, Alan Klein isn't in the picture, so there's no point in even discussing it.
Hmm.
Yeah, I have a feeling that they might have continued longer because that particular battle wouldn't have happened. John and George had put out solo projects, John's avant-garde stuff. And
Hmm.
it is my opportunity to mention Life with the Lions.
Mhm.
And George and Wonderwall music. And so they knew that they'd be able to do solo things. And George, of course, had his whole backlog of songs. I don't think John and Paul would have objected if he put out an album of his own songs. And if it did really, really well, then maybe he would have gotten more songs on the next batch of Beatles albums. And, it could have worked out really well. So I guess the answer I'm heading towards is that if Brian were alive and if he had gotten it together, personally, he probably could have kept them going for some time longer than they did go.
Hmm. And to go along with your point, there's a moment in the Get Back documentary where George is saying to John, I'm thinking about making a solo album, but also
Mhm.
meaning he's going to come back to the group. Because
Yeah.
for a while I'm going to do stuff on my own, but not thinking of leaving.
Hmm.
So, they were thinking about that at that time.
Hmm.
And of
I,
course, John's famous, the tape from that meeting where John is saying, okay, well, I get four songs, Paul gets four
hmm,
songs, George gets four
Mhm.
songs, and Ringo wants two songs. He's got that too.
right, but Paul was against that. He
So,
didn't like that
well,
idea at that moment.
at that moment, he was dominating the albums. But
Right.
I mean, in my view, I think that, we'll assume, as Alan did, that Brian has gotten his act together and all that other good stuff. And they suffered their failure with Magical Mystery Tour at the same time they're beginning to launch Apple. And they realized, gee, maybe we do need, someone with some business experience to kind of help us and let us do what we want. So in my, what if scenario, not only do the Beatles stay together and do solo stuff, but here's the fun stuff. Paul remains extremely active with Apple, doesn't run away from Apple. So now
Mm,
you've
Mhm.
got, Mary Hopkin, doing really well, but he does some more work with Badfinger. No Alan Klein to come in and chase everyone away. And so James Taylor's with Apple. Peter Asher stays with Apple. Maybe they sign Linda Ronstadt and they bring in all kind of new talent. And Apple becomes what the Beatles envisioned, this great label, all because we didn't have it all fall apart with Alan Klein coming in and getting rid of all those excess artists. And also, once again, look at the original releases on Apple. Paul is intimately involved, and then
Hmm.
all of a sudden he's not
Mhm.
involved at all.
right.
That would not have happened. So I think
Mm,
Apple's the big success here.
okay. So you're saying you think the Beatles would have continued as a band for a while, or it would have always been group and solo at the same time?
I think they could have juggled group and solo. They were, group and solo and producing other artists. I mean, that's essentially what Paul was doing.
Hmm. Okay. And I also want to add to this conversation, do you think that they would have allowed Brian to get involved that much with Apple? Because you know of, well, George Harrison talking about how he was not happy with how Brian handled Celtab, for example. And they didn't make a lot of money there, and he was taking advantage of at the time, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Tom?
this is where I think I want to give Brian a little more credit than he generally gets. He was
Mhm.
learning as it went along too. I think he would have had a more active role in Apple Music. Okay, so he's managing, like the Silky. Okay, they're not an Apple act, but they're still kind of in that Brian management stable kind of thing. I mean, when we think of the stable of artists that he managed, the Billy J. Kramers and the Cilla Blacks of the world.
Hmm.
As you got toward
Mhm.
the mid '60s, there were ones that he wasn't very active. You didn't hear a whole lot about them, but he sure got behind that Silky record, right?
Right.
Hey.
He called in the the heavy horsepower to do that. I think he may have been, Brian may have been put more into some sort of artist development or artist management kind of thing as a function of Apple. In terms of the Beatles' longevity, though, you cannot rule out something that happened while Brian was alive, and that's John meeting Yoko. Okay. End of the day, she, of course, she does not break up the Beatles. But what happens in a more pointed way is John finds that he needs an artistic outlet with her more than he needs the Beatles. Okay, that doesn't change. That kicked off when Brian was still with us. So, how much that would have been held in check? I think very little. Okay, John dove head first into that like he did with just about anything he did. He was very intense and a very active pursuer of whatever he was working on. And I don't think that first string of albums, Two Virgins, Life with the Lions, and getting on into the wedding album, of course, once they do get married, and and then into Plastic Ono and everything else. I don't think that piece of history changes. I think Brian may have had to take on what John had told him in that famous session. I think it was the Baby You're a Rich Man session. We'll take care of the music. You go mind the percentages. He may have had to take that up to the next level, and whether that was through artist development on Apple or who knows? Maybe look, the famous story about he gave away millions of dollars and left it on the table with the merchandising and stuff. I mean, we're past the era of the lunch boxes and things like that, but there were other ways, to brand the band at that point, and that would have been, squarely his cross to bear.
Interesting. So then
Yeah.
you also think that the Beatles would have stayed together longer?
I'm not sure about that. I'm thinking, when John said, once they start dabbling in the solo stuff, and as the history books have shown us, once he gets out of avant-garde world for half a project, which is Live Peace in Toronto. Half of it's rock and roll, half of it's the avant-garde. But he says, what does he say on the plane on the way back? That's it. I'm out of that band. This is what I want to do. So he still had his pop and rock and roll side, but he was totally on board with the whole artistic side that Yoko was bringing. I don't think it extends the life of the band at all.
Interesting.
Quickly, I think Brian would have somehow managed to try to keep him around a little bit longer and say, do your own thing, John, but we need to put out an album. He would probably tell him once a year, but it might be once every couple of years.
And
Well,
that
I
would
mean, look,
help, and that would help John underwrite his
but
avant-garde stuff.
Alan Klein and the whole bringing him on, same church, different pew. What did they say? Don't tell anyone. We got to get a good deal for the next album. That didn't extend the life of the band either.
No, but by then the damage was really done.
Right.
Well, the thing is with John, he was hard to figure out, even though I believe he was totally honest. Whatever he said was how he felt in that moment. But there are times like when he watched the Let It Be film, with the guy from Rolling Stone, and he was crying through it. So he was emotional seeing the band in that film. And at the same time, you kind of got the impression circa 1970, 73, 74, he was kind of warming up a bit towards maybe working with the others. You don't really know. Nobody knows for sure. But, he was tough to figure out. Al, what are your thoughts?
Well, a couple of things. Going with Alan's thesis that that Brian would have kind of gotten himself back together during 67 or beyond. It's very possible that he might have taken a more direct role in with Magical Mystery Tour, especially since it was, he had a background in stage work and the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts.
Right.
So I'm pretty certain that he would not have approved of Magical Mystery Tour the way it turned out. So he may have had more of a role in the production of that than perhaps people think. And also now Apple was actually in its its kind of its birth stirrings, even while Brian was still alive. So he might have very well might have gotten involved with with management of the different acts on Apple. But also as far as the the breakup, it's possible that he might have approved a situation that previously had not existed of the group basically taking a sabbatical and doing, getting their solo chops out of the way, and then coming back together, which had to that point had never happened with a major rock band.
Yeah, and what would have been interesting would have been, does each Beatle hold their best songs for their solo stuff or put it on the Beatles album to make sure they get it on the Beatles album? That would have been interesting.
You wonder.
Anyway, we can guess Cold Turkey would not have been on the Beatles album.
That much we do know. And what's the new Mary Jane? Well, eventually it was on the anthology.
Yeah. Less said, the better.
Less said, the better. Exactly.
Okay. All right. I don't know about what you said there, Al, about Magical Mystery Tour, because like what Tom said about with John saying to Brian, like the creative side leave to us, and that could have extended into their films.
Except that they had never, to that point, they had never done a film on their own. Yeah. And I just have a feeling, but I have a feeling that that Brian probably would not have really approved of the, from the, to the seat of your pants.
Yeah, he may have inserted himself as a sounding board.
Yeah,
which by the way is a good thing.
Yeah,
I mean, you can make that case when we talk about, I don't know, anything like Paul McCartney albums. Does an outside producer, even if only a sounding board, does it improve the finished product?
Exactly.
So you make a great point there, Al.
Would give my regards to Broad Street have ended up as a Beatles film.
Yeah.
And one can only hope not.
But Brian also, the other thing about Apple is that it had so many tentacles, and
Yes.
Brian might have been very handy for the boutique. He had a fashion sense, and that would have been one thing. And I don't know about electronics and all that. He might have said, look at this Alex guy, you really should dump him. And that would have saved me a lawsuit.
Yeah.
So Al, in your opinion, do you think the Beatles would have lasted longer if Brian had lived?
I think they might have taken that sabbatical around the same time, because he did have a hands-off policy as far as them in the studio. And of course, we know that there were problems, as certainly on the White Album and all the stuff that we know all too well. So it's possible that that they might have decided that at the end of '69 or whatever to take a sabbatical, basically a creative sabbatical. Get their get their solo thing together individually, and then come back together.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So, Tom has a completely different opinion, which is interesting because he doesn't think that would make a difference. But because let's face it, Yoko was the most important thing in John's life at that point, towards the end.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to another one. This is a simple yes or no, but whether it's simple or not, we'll find out. We all
do you
know
think any of us can give a yes or no answer?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll do like a flash answer. As soon as Ken finishes the questions, he'll say go, and you either give a thumbs up or a thumbs down. What do you
No,
think?
I want a healthy debate here. That's what I
Okay.
want. We all know that when the Beatles Sessions album was proposed, the big single was going to be Leave My Kitten Alone, and everybody was talking about it. And it should come out as the Beatles single, and the Beatles nixed the album. Of course, it ended up on the Beatles anthology.
Mhm.
But my question is, do you think the Beatles made a mistake in not releasing Leave My Kitten Alone at the end of 64 for Beatles for Sale back then? Since so many people rave about that song, especially John's vocals, do you
Mhm.
think that, you know, it should have been left off, or do you think they made the right decision? This time we'll start with Al.
I think it was the right decision because they generally had very good instincts, especially in conjunction with George Martin,
Hmm.
very good instincts as to what should be on each album. And especially since Beatles for Sale was somewhat covers heavy, it's possible they figured, well, we won't do one more cover,
Mhm.
Hmm.
you know. So I think they made the right call.
Okay. And you know what I'm going to say here, because since so many
Mhm.
people point out
Mr. Moonlight.
that
Yeah.
that's possibly the worst song in their catalog. Some people say
It's
it. I'm not
no,
saying I feel that way,
no, it's
but
not by any stretch of the imagination. Is it the worst song in their catalog?
Right.
No, no.
okay.
I take it over Wild Honey Pie any day.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I will tell you that John Lennon's opening vocal on Mr. Moonlight is worth the price of admission.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
That's right.
Right. You know, just
So
because
I think
people,
I think the problem with Leave My Kitten Alone was they were going to do the 8/6 to get to 14 thing.
yeah.
So, it was, I don't know, where would you have put it? Maybe it, could have been a B-side or something, but I think their thinking was, now, we'll go back to, now that we have more time, we'll go back to writing originals and things. So I
Hmm.
think it was
Well,
just inevitably going to be either that or Mr. Moonlight, and they felt Mr. Moonlight was a better track.
Yeah.
okay.
Hmm.
Well, I'm just saying they could have replaced it with another song that they covered. I would never suggest they replace it taking out one of their originals.
Right.
No, but what other one would you have dropped? I mean, they're
Yeah.
all
Not
Oh,
Right.
I
Kansas City, right? I mean, what are we taking out?
No.
no,
Right. Right.
words of love. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
rock and roll music.
Yeah.
right.
I mean,
Yeah.
Believe me, I think they made the right decision.
And they made it
But
early too, because they didn't go back to that. They went back to Mr. Moonlight. They didn't go back to Leave My Kitten Alone. So
mhm.
I think right away something just, no, this isn't strong enough. I think they instinctively felt that.
Hmm.
okay. And what about all the people who feel that Mr. Moonlight has that cheesy organ solo in there?
Too bad.
Listen
You
to
know?
John's vocal.
Here's what I would have
Yes,
done.
exactly.
I would have
Okay.
I would have sort of prefigured Abbey Road by 5 years and had Leave My Kitten Alone there instead of Mr. Moonlight. But after the run out groove, I would have had just John's opening to Mr. Moonlight.
Okay, sounds good.
That would be a way to end the album. Jesus. But Alan, I could swear that from conversations we've had that you would have preferred Leave My Kitten Alone, right?
Yeah, I prefer it as a song, basically. I mean, it's tough because that John's vocal, especially in the opening, but really all throughout, is really good.
Hmm.
Hmm.
The cheesy organ does kind of, take something away from it for me. Um,
Now,
but
ironically, originally they had a cheesy sounding George guitar solo. Actually,
hmm,
not too cheesy, but it was kind of very reverby and kind of
Hmm.
And
strange.
it didn't
Yeah.
work. They
Hmm.
And
really did.
No, that's why they
the
went with the
one good
organ.
thing about the decision that they made is that it all through the 80s and into the 90s, it gave all of us something to hanker after, even though we had it on
Right.
bootleg. But it meant that when they said there really isn't anything left in the vaults, we knew there was because we
Yeah.
knew about Kitten and in a lot of cases had heard Kitten. Um,
Hmm.
and it turned out obviously there were other things too, but so I mean it did give them something to hold on to, hold out for when they were broken up and putting out something like the anthology, but obviously they weren't planning on that. Um, I don't know, maybe they could have done a couple more songs and done an EP like around Hard Day's Nighttime. There was the album and the EP, The Long Tall Sally. Um, but I really love that track. I still do, and I would have loved hearing it, I guess, in 1964.
Hmm.
I always had one of the ironies about the Beatles was Lennon and McCartney and later George's songwriting was so great that they quit doing covers. And I wish we had more EMI
Hmm.
recorded covers.
Yeah.
Hmm.
You
Well,
know,
just listening to all the BBC stuff,
that
Right.
exactly.
Yeah,
oh my
Bingo.
God.
that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, Beatles for Sale is probably I would call it in my third tier Beatle albums. I mean, I have my favorites, then there's the greats, and then there's the ones that are great, but not as great as some others, or I don't know if that
Hmm.
comes out right.
Hmm.
But Beatles for Sale, maybe because it's a lot of covers, well performed and well sung and everything else,
Hmm.
it doesn't hold it as special a place. But that said, I think it's a great album. I
Hmm.
go to it from time to time. It's not ignored. It's not underplayed here at my house. Um, I'm I'm very happy with how it came out, and I think Mr. Moonlight is part of it. You got to remember, that's the second album of the year for '64, where they're touring. They're still doing BBC. They made a
Hmm.
movie. At some point they had to what we call cut and run, do it, and let's move along. Um, you know,
And
and they
absolutely they had
had
to cut
they
and
had a
run.
catalog
Hmm.
of covers, as we know, as you say, Ken, from the
Hmm.
BBC album and from the Star Club and from the other live bootlegs we've heard. We know they had hundreds of covers that they could have chosen from. So this is one that they felt was somehow representative. They wanted to bring numbers from their live set into this, and there it is. It's not radically different other than the organ versus guitar solo than the version we hear at the Star Club, right?
Hmm.
And remember they're only about a year removed from really still doing a lot of covers in concert. I just,
Yeah.
look, we
Hmm.
all collect the bootlegs. I was just listening to, I think it's already the fifth upgrade of that 1963 show from the
Oh, the Stowe.
Stowe School in
Yeah.
England.
Hmm.
And they're doing the things like Some Other Guy, and they're
Hmm.
doing I Just Don't Understand. And
Yeah,
Hmm.
the
great
catalog
song.
is so deep, and they're only a year removed from
Yeah.
doing this. That period of mid 63 to mid 64 is just an incredible transformation for them. So, getting them look, I could have picked eight covers or six covers to put on Beatles for Sale that me personally I prefer over the ones they chose. Somehow some other guy would be in there. Soldier of Love would be in there.
Right.
Absolutely.
Got a
Absolutely.
Rhythm and Blues would be in there, and probably a couple others that I simply love. Unfortunately, it wasn't Frangioni for sale. It was Beatles for. They get to make that choice. I think they made the right one.
Yeah, and like I
Okay.
said, if they wouldn't have been so damn good at writing their own material, we would have gotten those songs.
That's right.
No question.
Yeah. And we have to be so grateful that we have those BBC recordings
Yeah.
to
Hmm.
Yes.
listen to after all these years. But I often wonder because I don't think we have all that much information about how the Beatles made those decisions, which covers to put into their albums, because they had such a backlog. And
Well, I
like you
think
said,
some of them are just ingrained favorites. Witness
Hmm.
Kansas City. There are
hmm,
at least 12 different commercially released performances by Paul McCartney on lead vocal of
Hmm.
that song, whether it be in his solo career, live, Beatles, BBC, whatever it is. That's a go-to for him. So
Right.
no explanation needed.
It's kind of funny as well that Kitten never turned up on the BBC and it wasn't on the
It's
Hamburg
true.
tapes.
Yeah.
It's like we have this one recording of Leave My
Yeah.
Kitten Alone, and it's an EMI studio recording. It's
Yeah.
odd.
They could have put it on Help if they thought it was good enough,
Right.
because they
Yeah.
were looking for something to, you know, they didn't want 13 tracks, and they needed it, so they took one of the Larry Williams songs. Which the only reason we got those was because of Capitol's handling of the Beatles catalog, and Capitol said we need 2 more songs, and we got 2 great Larry Williams rockers.
Hmm.
So why didn't they send Capitol Leave My Kitten Alone?
The Beatles didn't think it was good enough. They didn't finish it in their mind.
Mm.
They recorded it once. They recorded Mr. Moonlight once, and then they went back a day or 2 later and re-recorded Mr. Moonlight, but didn't re-record Leave My Kitten Alone. They just didn't feel it was ready.
Hmm. Okay. Just to expand on this topic,
Oh, one
when
other
you
quick
think
thing.
about, yeah,
One
go
other
ahead.
quick thing. Had they released from the Sessions album, had it come out, Leave My Kitten Alone, it would not have been a #1 hit, I will predict.
I'll
Yeah.
agree with you.
Absolutely, because especially at that was at that particular point in the early 80s when the Beatles were no longer cool.
Mhm.
It was, the witness what happened to 20 greatest hits
Right.
as
And real
opposed
music.
to and real music,
Mhm.
as opposed to
I mean,
one.
but they were getting a lot of flack, at least, Capitol was here. Real music and 20 greatest hits. There was such a heavy overlap, and they were released so close together. It was like, hey, wait a minute, they're handling this, dare I say, like the Beach Boy catalog.
Yes.
Picking the same,
Very much
the
so.
same hits. I mean, I think 8 out of the 20 ended up on the Real Music album. It was too much. It's simply too much. And then then they started editing songs like Hey Jude. It was like, hey, wait a minute, we don't need the scissors. But I seem to remember in the early '80s certain things, new things being embraced. Certainly, Nobody Told Me was embraced.
Sure.
Certainly, All Those Years Ago was embraced. Certainly, the Tug of War album was embraced.
The duets.
It wasn't like the Beatles were like, all right, hands off, they're done. They'll never get back together, and we don't want to know them anymore. It's not true. There was plenty there that still kept people's interest. A new Beatles single might. I mean, look. A track from John that he didn't finish, that was 4 years old, made the top 5. I wouldn't rule out the fact that the Beatles, a new Beatles single, could have had a good deal of chart success. I wouldn't.
I just don't think Leave
Twist
My
and
Kitten
Shout
Alone
from
was the
Ferris
one.
Bueller's Day Off did pretty
That's
well.
a good.
didn't it?
That's
That's
true.
a good point.
Yeah.
And that was a song we already had
Yeah, many
100
times.
times over, right?
Yeah. And also, don't forget all the successful duets that Paul had, and No More Lonely Nights.
That's what I'm saying.
the first-
It wasn't like the book was closed on Beatle or Beatles, plural, having chart success. There were
Right.
things, I remember this vividly when All Those Years Ago came out. The jukebox strip did not say George Harrison. It said Paul, George, and Ringo. Okay? There was still a bit of let's hold on to this for a bit. There was still a piece of that.
Okay.
Right, but there was a perception in that time, especially in the early '80s, and especially after the advent of MTV and all, that the Beatles were kind of passé, that they weren't cool as I don't know, soft
Duran
cell.
Duran.
Duran. There you go.
But even MTV came around, right? They ran they went full 180 and showed all the Beatle cartoons. Okay.
Yeah, until Apple bought them back
there
and said,
wasn't a lot
we'll never
of
see them again.
There weren't a lot of Beatle videos proper that were, I mean, we know they made them. We've got
Right.
we've got them all. But whether there was licensing issues or they couldn't find the masters or they weren't up to quality or whatever it was, you certainly weren't seeing Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields and things like that on MTV, and they needed to fill some gap for their audience. And that was what they did.
Right.
Yeah,
and
but
of course we know how slow Apple was at going with newer technology.
Sure.
Yeah.
You know.
But I've said many times that I noticed being on the radio then, there was a definite lull in that mid 80s when it came to the Beatles as a group. And maybe some of that had to deal with John getting murdered and the depression
Absolutely.
that
Yeah.
followed from that. So being reminded of it, you know,
Yeah,
that
but then
didn't.
how do you explain the success of Nobody Told Me and Milk and Honey? I remember that being pretty warmly embraced.
That's a good point because it's the last of John's recordings,
Right.
Yeah.
you
I think
know,
Plus,
what
and they
may
were
have,
Nobody
so
Told Me was a great song.
yeah,
yeah,
that's true.
even unfinished, it was a top 5 record.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think what may have soured people, leave the film out of it for a minute, of Give My Regards to Broad Street, Paul going back and redoing the Beatles songs. And by the way, the versions on that album I really like. I can
Or
listen
very,
to
yeah.
the soundtrack. It's terrific. But I think it was viewed as, wait, now we're going to get that recycled in some way. And it's, look, as good as any of them are, the Beatles catalog, to borrow a term from my friend Al Sussman here, it's the Rolls Royce
Yes.
of the
Of
catalogs,
pop music
of pop
catalogs.
music catalogs. And it was seen as somehow, I don't know, diluted or tinkering with it or whatever, prism it was being looked at. And that may have diluted, the reverence for the catalog.
Yeah. If you ever bought a
Hmm.
Little Richard album of Little Richard redoing his stuff from,
Oh,
it's like,
yeah.
why bother? But,
Mm.
then again, now Taylor Swift redoes her albums and people go, oh, that's cool. But who
Yeah.
knows?
Hmm. Okay. I just wanted to add to this conversation those other songs that ended up on the Beatles anthology, which were proposed for sessions too. Do you
Mhm.
think the Beatles made the right moves in not releasing That Means a Lot? If
Yes.
you've got trouble, I know how you all feel
Well,
about
that
if you've got trouble,
Yes.
and not guilty for that matter.
well that means a lot. It's basically the same rhythm track and tempo and
Ticket to
almost
Ride.
melody line of Ticket to Ride.
Hmm.
So it was too close a cousin. That one, yeah, given the choice, Ticket to Ride or That Means a Lot, they sure made the right decision there.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But
I think
it just
we can agree.
never gelled. I mean, it's like Paul's singing, sometimes it works, sometimes it's not. And I think in the back of his mind he's thinking, this is not.
Well,
Hmm.
You can just tell the
one of
session
the
breaks down.
songs that was on Sessions and ultimately appeared on Anthology, I always loved as a bootleg, and certainly, Al, you'll remember here in New York hearing the word exclusive
Yes.
whispered over it when it was on the air. I always thought How Do You Do It was a terrific pop single. I love How Do You Do It. Now, again, here's the counterpoint, right? I love that song. I love that record. The Beatles hated it. Okay, Paul has gone and made fun of it. Oh, we couldn't go back to Liverpool singing "How Do You Do What You Do," and they didn't like it, and they left it off. That's their decision. Okay,
Yeah, but
I thought it
wanted-
was a perfectly produced record. George Martin, told them this is a #1 hit, and he was right. Okay, I found nothing wrong with that record.
no,
But
but I think
the
Tom,
Beatles had a distaste for it.
it wasn't just
It
that
was
though. It was they wanted their single to be 2 Lennon-McCartney songs.
That's right.
I truly
Yes.
believe that. Because the Beatles could have said, well, look, why don't we put Long Tall Sally out as an A side? They wanted Lennon-McCartney songs for the A and B side, and How Do You Do It was doomed for that reason alone.
Yeah, but I mean, they could have put it on the album, right? They
Yeah,
could
they
have.
could have, but George
But no,
Martin,
they
they couldn't put it on. It either was going to be an A side or nothing, because of the songwriter, where his thing was when he was told, well, they're going to put it on a B side of the Beatles. No, 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 no. In other words, he felt he had written the hit,
Yeah.
and Mitch Murray basically said it's either a Beatles A side or that's it.
Hmm.
And so
Yeah.
George Martin gave it to another group as an A side. So
Right.
that's how that
And that
played out.
turned out to be a #1 song
Yeah.
Yeah.
for
And
Jerry and the
plus,
Pacemakers.
yeah.
As
Right.
Tom said, it was a great song.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So George
And-
Martin was right, and the Beatles got their way, and we're all the better for it.
Yeah.
In a way,
Yeah.
because if it
And
wasn't
of
for the
course,
fact that they,
what song knocked "How Do You Do It" out of the #1 slot? None other than "From Me to You." So,
Mhm.
you know, everybody wins here.
And it gave us another thing to hanker for through the 80s. And
That's right. No, I
Yes.
love that record. And that one, I mean, I don't know about down in New Orleans, Bruce, but Ken and Al, I know. And Alan, I'm not sure, were you a native New Yorker?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
So, you know, WPLJ and WNEW, remember they used to play that,
that's
Mhm.
right.
and you'd hear the exclusive get whispered in, you know.
I remember once, I can't remember which station it was. I think it was NEW, had one of those Beatles A to Z.
Yeah.
And when they
Mhm.
got to H, they played that, and I said, "What?
Yeah.
A Beatles record? I don't have."
Hell, I used to listen. I used to listen to their A to Z just so I could hear "Misery" and "There's a Place" because they weren't on the Capitol records that I owned.
it drove me crazy to look for Misery. I
Yeah,
couldn't figure out where it
yeah,
was.
Mhm.
At least There's a Place was on the flip side of Twist and Shout.
yeah, yeah. So, anywho, that was yeah. So, you know, again, when it came to song picks like that, I mean, apropos of what we were talking about a few minutes ago with "Leave My Kitten Alone," you know, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think "How Do You Do It" was going to be the B side of
No,
of "Leave My Kitten Alone."
no.
Oh no, it was going to be the Christmas time, or no, Obladi
Yeah.
Oblada. You're right. You're right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
A rare time when I stumped Tom on something.
Oh my
No,
goodness.
I self-corrected there. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
With a little prodding, with a little
Yeah.
prodding.
Yeah.
Okay. And also,
I'm
do
not,
you,
and by the way, Tom, I'm not suggesting that we do a trivia game on Beatles solo stuff with you and I on the same panel,
Yeah.
because the final score will probably be 10-0 Tom.
Yeah.
Yes.
Uh-oh. We all know how that'd work out.
It was
But
9-1, I remember.
yeah.
you should have me involved with it.
So anyway, Ken, back to your impossible to answer questions.
Okay. But we didn't finish about Not Guilty. Were there
Okay.
any decisions the Beatles made as far as the unreleased stuff that you think were the wrong decisions?
I think Not Guilty would have made it on the White Album, but for the fact George already had 4 better songs for that album.
Exactly. Yeah.
So,
Hmm.
I mean, I can listen to Not Guilty. I cannot
Hmm.
listen to What's the New Mary Jane.
Okay.
Mhm.
I'll bet there's a lot of people out
Agree.
there that would prefer Not Guilty over Piggies.
Yeah.
You know, not
Well,
everybody's a fan of that. And I love Long, 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 but not
Oh, yeah.
everybody is.
Oh,
Not
yeah.
everybody's a fan of that song.
And I think the fact that it was such a struggle to get even a suitable take of
Hmm.
Not Guilty.
yeah.
I think that probably had a bearing on that decision as
it
well.
also was airing Dirty Laundry at a time
Yeah,
when
I
they maybe
think,
didn't want
yeah.
to
Well,
air
that
Dirty
too.
Laundry.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark Lewison's theory is that George always knew that it wasn't going to go on the album, and they did so many takes just because he wanted to make them deal with that song and that lyric over and over and over. And I think he's serious.
It's
No, well, and then when they didn't get enough of that, he wrote "I Me Mine," right? Pretty much, it's part 2. I think
Yeah.
the one we'll call it title, not song, because to distinguish from alternate versions, the one title that shows up, it was on Sessions certainly, and certainly in the anthology, that I think could have made a great freestanding Beatles single, but for the fact he was writing it for someone else, was "Come and Get It."
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
sure.
Oh God,
I mean, let's face it. I mean, it's ear candy. I mean,
Mhm.
the top 10 record here and in England. The Beatles could have had fun with that. Certainly Ringo's drums would have filled that nicely. The
Mhm.
harmonies, were Beatles all over it, right? A lot of people thought it was the Beatles, and there's a good reason for it, right?
Hmm.
That was to me probably my favorite unreleased title
Mhm.
out of the lot. But I mean, I knew the song for however many
Of
years,
course, yeah.
through the Badfinger version.
Yeah, and Badfinger did a great job with it because Paul basically told him, "This is a
Yes,
hit single. Do not change it at
do
all."
it this way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he probably
That's
would have
right.
told Ringo that for the drumming because the
Yeah.
drumming's quite good. I
Yeah.
mean, the
Mhm.
drums are almost the lead instrument on the song.
Yeah.
Hmm. Never looked at it that way. I'll
Mm.
have to
Think
listen
about
with
Mhm.
different ears. Okay, we got one more question here, and then we'll move on to the McCartney part of the show. Now, this
Okay.
one's really impossible to answer. It's just your opinion here. We all know that the last album of all new material that George Harrison recorded was Cloud Nine before he died. Yes, we had Live in Japan. Yes, we had the two Traveling Wilburys. We had the best of Dark Horse with three new songs. And once George knew that he was sick and he wasn't going to make it, he wanted to finish up all these other songs that were left in the can. So my question is to you, again, how do you even answer this?
Mhm.
If George was completely fine health-wise, do you think he ever would have made another studio album? Because think about it, that's a long time.
Mhm.
1987 for Cloud Nine. He passed away in 2001.
Mm.
Okay? If George had been fine all these years, we may never have gotten to Brainwashed.
Mm.
So how do you know? He loved to make music. He had his own studio. He could record whenever he wanted to, but putting it out, promoting it if he had to, that's a whole other ballgame.
Mm.
Do you think that George Harrison would have released another album had he not had cancer at the end and wanted to finish up all these other songs? Um,
Yes.
okay, Bruce, you're first. Why
Yeah.
do you
I
think
mean,
that?
look, because I think he was a musician and I think it was in him and he would have wanted to do it, and he was doing other things he was enjoying, assuming when he had his good health, he was enjoying
Mhm.
gardening and things like that. But I think
Mhm.
at some point in time, he would have gone back to it and said, "Yeah, let's get another album out." I just think that the bug is in them, and Paul took a long time between albums, but I think, at some point you're just going to come back and say, "I want to do another album." So I think he definitely would have.
Well, but this was much longer than Paul's 5.5 years, and
Yeah.
John had 5 years, really
Mm.
more than that for Double Fantasy.
Mm.
Mhm.
And Cloud Nine itself was 5 years between that and
Yeah.
Don
I
Troppo.
just don't
All
This
right.
see him.
this
I just don't see him quitting.
Yeah.
He's a
I
musician.
Yeah, I can't see it being hung up. Ken, I'll pretend we're back in WDHA studios in 1986 and you were throwing out questions like this and you said, "Do you think George Harrison will record an album, go out and promote the hell out of it everywhere he goes, have a number one pop hit, and do you think Ringo Starr will ever embark on a 35-year tour?" You know, these things were inconceivable.
Yeah.
right.
George's recording careers didn't get much quieter than George's and Ringo's were in the mid 80s. They simply
Hmm.
didn't.
Mhm.
Ringo hadn't, I mean, he did one-offs and Bangladesh or a walk on somewhere
Right.
live, but a tour? I mean, are you insane?
I
Um,
didn't believe it. I didn't believe it when it
I
was first
know.
Mhm.
reported.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm with Bruce on this one. I think something, somewhere gets him to do this. Um, he didn't. I don't think he felt rushed. Certainly, some of the songs on Brainwash were over a decade old. By the time that thing came out, so he
Hmm.
was in
Mhm.
no rush to do it. And some of those he may not have even maybe wanted to put out his own versions of. Things like Run So Far. That was something
Right.
Hmm.
for
Yeah.
somebody else. I mean, the puzzle for me was always how the Traveling Wilburys didn't take any road. I still can't figure that one out, right?
Mm.
That was made for them, sound wise, the lyric, traveling, and he wrote and all that good stuff. I that still escapes me how that one never was done by the Wilburys. But I'm with Bruce on this one. Something would have reignited him. I think just like Cloud Nine did, and just like getting the bug, And look, Ringo's, was driven by him, cleaning up his life and things like that, and getting back to square one, and whatever it takes in their life. I think he would have made another record for sure.
Okay. Well, I certainly hope that was the case. But just to play devil's advocate, like I said, there's a difference between recording for your own pleasure and writing for your own pleasure
Yeah.
and putting it out there to the public.
Yep.
He could have made hundreds of songs in his
Yeah.
studio if he wanted to,
He
but
probably
not
did.
release them,
Sure. Yeah.
you know? But how do you know? He had enough success in his life between the Beatles, between his solo music, Handmade Films was a big company in the UK, especially. He had success with that. He might have said, I've had enough success. And he always thought of himself as a gardener towards the end,
Hmm.
Yeah,
you know?
or
So
maybe he records a song for a Mel Gibson movie again.
Yeah.
I'm talking about an album, though,
I
full
know.
album. So, Alan,
I think I don't know. This could just be wishful thinking, but I think he would have. I think he was recording these songs and not doing anything with them, but I have a feeling that maybe there would have been at some point a certain critical mass of all of these songs, and he or Olivia might have said, why don't you put these out? Ringo, before Stop and Smell the Roses, he thought he was done.
Hmm.
Mm.
Barbara talked him into doing that album
hmm,
when it was Can't Fight Lightning. Um, and he's said that, and not that that went that much further. There was still a little period where until the Mark Hudson era when he really really started cranking them out again.
right.
But still, Ringo's a musician too, and ultimately, I think what Bruce said is right. Ultimately, there is something in there that wants to express publicly what you want to say. And George had been recording it, he'd been stacking up these tracks. And I think he eventually would have put out something else. I mean, I don't think he had a bad experience with Cloud Nine. I think he had a good experience with the two Wilburys albums. And,
Yeah.
Hmm.
we're not, for the sake of this question, we're not counting the two Wilburys albums. But in terms of George's life, he counted them. They were things
Oh,
he
I
was
agree.
doing, and I
Yeah.
think he had a good experience with them. I think eventually either he would have made more Wilburys albums or he would have put out something of his own. I kind of think he would have
Okay.
gotten back to doing his own.
Well, he did say at
And
the time of the Wilburys that he preferred making albums with the Wilburys than the burden of having it,
No, all by
an
himself.
entire, yeah, by himself. Al?
and he was fairly active in the early 90s. He did the tour with Eric Clapton in Japan,
Mhm.
Right.
and did a couple of one-offs, in the early 90s. And then it was probably not too far after that that he began
Yeah.
getting sick.
Hmm.
So
And
it's
Sam,
very conceivable that if he had remained healthy, that say the mid well, of course, now, of course, in the mid 90s, he of course was involved with the anthology.
Right.
So it's possible that perhaps if he was in good health after the anthology, much like Paul did with Flaming Pie,
Right.
George might have decided, yeah, you know, I'll do I'll do a new album.
Mm.
Okay. Well, we can either do one more tough question or we'll just move on to the McCartney part. How do you guys
It's
feel?
up to you.
As long as there's no arithmetic.
Yes. No math involved.
Right.
All right, we kind of touched on this, I think the last time Bruce was on. But let's just say the situation here in the United States was different with Capitol Records, and they signed the Beatles. They didn't have to wait until I Want to Hold Your Hand to release, their material. And they released all their singles. Love Me Do, Please Please Me, From Me to You, She Loves You, I Want to Hold Your Hand, the same time as they came out in the UK. Do you think that part of the reason why the Beatles were such a success in the US was because all that stuff was held back and they made the biggest splash once I Want to Hold Your Hand became a hit
Mm,
and everything came back and all these singles are on the charts at the same time and there was hysteria? Or do you think it would have been somewhat different if it did come out? Because you have to guess also, would Love Me Do have done well?
that's the
Would Please
question.
Please Me have done? Let's just say the scenario was exactly the same as it was in the UK. Do you think things would have been any different?
It would not have been the same. Love Me
Hmm.
Do would not have been a number one song. I guarantee you that.
Hmm.
Hmm.
If it came out when it came back then, Please Please Me came out, even though it was only on VJ, it never really did better than, with the exception of one or two markets, it was a top 40 hit. So, you're talking about songs that, you know, were good, but they just weren't making it there. And I think it was, look, and I'm not saying the songs were bad. My goodness, I'll Get You was number one in Worcester, Massachusetts,
Yep.
as a B-side. She Loves You was 10. But I think the songs were great, but the impact of having them all out at the same time, for most
Hmm.
people in America, you heard I Want to Hold Your Hand. Then you heard She Loves You and or Please Please Me, depending on where you were.
Right.
And that was boom, 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 and it was over. And I just don't think it would have been, Beatlemania would have exploded the way it did. Quite frankly, I'm glad it happened the way it did. It
Hmm.
made
Okay.
life a lot more interesting. So I wouldn't change a thing.
But you're
Mm.
missing one point here. I was saying, what if Capitol released it? What if
I
they got
understand
behind
that.
it? But I'm just
Well,
saying,
Love
what
Me
if they put a
Do
lot of promotion
Love
behind
Me
it?
Do would not have been a big hit. Capitol would not have put anything behind it. Capitol turned down She Loves You and instead put out I'm Telling You Now by Freddie and the Dreamers. So we
Hmm.
know how Capitol would have promoted it. But what happened was by the time Capitol signed the Beatles, they realized how big they were in the UK and they decided, because of Brian prodding them and telling Livingston, you've got to put the money behind it.
Hmm.
Otherwise, Capital would not have put 40,000, I mean, 40, yeah, 400, was it 40? Yeah, $40,000,
$40,000. You know.
behind any of those singles. And, so it was meant to be the way it was, even though it was so convoluted. I would not have changed a thing. I think if you did it differently, it would not have been the same. Would the Beatles eventually have caught on in America? Yes. Would Beatlemania have exploded the way it did? No way.
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
I can't
Especially.
believe this question has gone on for about 4 minutes, and we've not used the term Ed Sullivan.
No,
The
That.
timing of Hold Your Hand coming out right at the end of 63 when they're in the on deck circle over there, one having nothing to
Hmm.
do with the other. You 40 grand or no 40 grand, you can't buy that kind of publicity.
no.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
But the Beatles
And
were big, but the Beatlemania exploded
Right.
before Sullivan. I just tell people, think of it as the explanation point on Beatlemania. The reason that 70 million people tuned in to see the Beatles wasn't because Beatlemania hadn't happened yet.
Right.
They tuned in
Mhm.
because I Want to Hold Your Hand, She Loves You, and Please Please Me were getting saturation airplay in every market in the country. And that's why they tuned in. Was Sullivan big? Yes. But Beatlemania happened before Sullivan.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
Tom, you
and
slept through it anyway.
I slept through
that's
it.
true.
I mean, look, I don't know what the big deal was. I slept through the whole thing.
Yeah, and another factor is the fact that rock groups, rock acts from England had no track record in America. You
Hmm.
know,
Mm.
Cliff Richard who was the biggest name in Britain from 1958 onward, uh, just never made it. at least in that period, uh, in America. You
Mhm.
know, and neither did Adam Faith, neither did Tommy Steele. You know, and there were, you know, obviously, you know, you do have the one number one record, the Tornadoes Telstar, but that was, you know, more of a novelty than anything else.
Mhm.
There's just no, there was no track record. So, it's very doubtful that Capitol would have put on a full court press to try to break the Beatles in America during '63.
Mhm. They also had Mr. Ackerbilk.
Hmm.
Oh, that's true.
Don't
Yeah,
forget about that.
right.
And
Alan,
if
you
you want to get her, Laurie London,
Um,
he's got
you
the
know,
whole
I
world in his
basically,
Yes.
hands.
there you
Basil
go.
Fomine.
I
Basil
think I basically
Fomine.
have to defer
Little
to
Jack Little.
Bruce on this one. But I wonder whether, okay, Capitol wouldn't have put anything behind these singles and they wouldn't have exploded, but might they have come out and had the same fate as they had on Swan and VJ? And then Sullivan and Brian Epstein would have come over, made his deals with Sullivan, got them on that. He could have gone to Capitol and said, "Look, we've got this. You should put something behind it." Basically what he did. And then Capitol could have brought back all the old singles that didn't sell the same way
Mm,
VJ and Swan did. I don't know.
I don't think the Capitol could have,
no.
but probably wouldn't have done it because they would have been competing with their own single. Whereas
Hmm.
VJ and Swan,
Wanted to get a piece of,
yeah,
Mm,
piece of the action.
yeah.
right.
Yeah. And if all four singles had pretty much failed to really get much traction, Capitol certainly would not have, even regardless of what kind of lobbying Brian might have done, Capitol was not going to put that much of an effort into a group that had four stiff singles in the U.S.
That's an
Yeah, I
excellent
mean
point. Yeah.
it's crazy how you get this perfect storm. And
Yeah,
Yeah.
when you just ask the question, the tougher question would be if the CBS Evening News had stayed 15 minutes,
right.
would the Beatles have made it the way they did?
That's true.
They're saying there would have been no feature story on the Beatles.
Right. No.
NBC wouldn't have run one. Nobody would have run one because you
Right.
only had 15 minutes of news.
Right. No Marsha Albert
Yeah,
requesting.
yeah.
You know.
The
It
Beatles
was meant to
story
be the
has,
way it was. I'll put
Yeah.
it that way.
yeah, there's a lot of what ifs in Beatle history.
Oh yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, what if the
Oh,
Beatles passed the deck audition? Mike Smith puts out Love of the
Yeah.
Love back with Red Sails in the Sunset, and we're still listening to Bobby Rydell through the 60s.
Right.
there's nothing wrong with Bobby Rydell.
Well, I'd rather listen to the
Forget Him
Beatles.
is one of my favorite songs.
Oh, mine too.
Yeah. Actually, he was a really good singer, Bobby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So was
Yeah.
Paul McCartney and John Lennon and
Okay.
George and
Okay.
Ringo.
Okay.
Just saying.
Everything pales in comparison to the Beatles, but you still have to give credit to the other talents
Sure.
out there.
Absolutely. Without
Anyway,
that other talent before them, there wouldn't be any Beatles.
that's true.
Hmm.
Okay. So that wraps up the tough questions part. You can wipe the sweat off your brow now, and we can move on to the Paul McCartney part of the show. Happy birthday, Paul, by the way. First of all, just want to ask all four of you your impressions of the new album, The Boys of Dungeon Lane. Let's start with Tom.
You
I
still
can't hear
there?
you.
You mute yourself.
Okay, you muted yourself.
Sorry about that.
Okay.
There's a stretch on that album from Home to Us to Life is Hard to First Star of the Night that proves, as if we needed more proof,
Hmm.
he is history's all-time premier melodist.
Hmm.
Whatever you think of his lyrics, his arrangements, his bass playing, or anything else, the melodies in those songs are absolutely stunning. Stunning. Nothing
Hmm.
short of stunning. I find that throughout the entire album. I liken this one without being, it's not derivative, but to me this reminded me, if Flaming Pie and Chaos in Creation had a baby, this is what it would sound like. And both those albums have
Mhm.
something in common with this, and that's having an outside producer. I think Paul benefits tremendously from
Hmm.
having an outside producer.
Sort of
Um,
as
Mhm.
John Lennon foil.
right, for
Mhm.
all of the, and I mean, not like the album New, which had what, four, I guess four producers.
Four
I
Mhm.
producers.
mean,
Right.
one producer to, to help him, keep the rails up. What I like about Andrew Watt is very much what I like about T-Bone Burnett and the great job he did with Ringo's, certainly the new album, and even with Look Up, is he didn't make him try and sound like he used to. He found, he kept the vocal arrangements very much in the sweet spot. And it cracks me
Mhm.
up like when people say, yeah, but he doesn't sound like he used to. Oh, really? At 84, he doesn't sound like he did when he was 24? Really?
Mm.
That's
Mm.
it's amazing. Um, he's singing in a very natural way. He's not he's not in that Rick Rubin, Johnny Cash space yet.
Mhm.
I think his voice suits this material great. He sounds like a guy who's looking back fondly on on the past, which he said, well, sure, that's what this whole album really is. Um, I like it a lot. I think it's his best probably since maybe I like it as much more than anything I think since Chaos and Creation, and that's a mouthful because I really liked albums like
Mhm.
Memory Almost Full.
Right.
Mhm.
Um, but it's certainly the best of his last. I like it better than McCartney 3. I like it better than Egypt Station, and those are records I like.
Hmm.
But this one I think has a really good, consistent feel to it. The melodies, as I say, particularly that one stretch, I just sat there and over listened to those three songs, and just marveled at his gift of melody. By the time we get to, Mama Gets By, I thought when
Mhm.
that song started, I said, "Who put that Ram track back on here?"
Yeah, yeah.
Who put Backseat of My Car on the end of this album?
Hmm.
Um, which, by the way, Ram is also another album I really like. So I mean, I'm not complaining.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, without it being, as I say, without it being a rehash or derivative, I like it the way I liked Flaming Pie and the way I liked Chaos. Very, I guess it's not quite organic, but a very natural sound coming from Paul. I really like this record a lot.
Hmm. Yeah. At some point, I'm going to do my own review on my channel here. I've held
Mhm.
off because I don't like rushing,
Mhm.
although I've now listened over 20 times, so I know what I'm going to say.
Mhm.
But I would agree with just about everything that Tom said there. And it's definitely a very consistently strong album. Even the songs that were sleepers for me, like We Too or
Mhm.
Never Know, I've grown to like a lot.
Mhm.
So if you like every single song on the album, obviously some more than others, and I think Life Can Be Hard,
Oh my God.
my
Mhm.
that should be a standard, as should Days We Left Behind
Yeah.
and Mama Gets By. Absolutely gorgeous tune to close with, but I
Mhm.
don't want to take up too much here of my opinion. Let me hear Alan.
Um, I really like it a lot, and I like it pretty much more every time I play it. And I've played it more than I play most new albums. The thing is, I've got other things to do, and so I kind of miss the days when I was a kid and had like fewer than 100 albums, and so they would all get played, every couple of days. Um, now there's just so much, but this one has like really kind of stayed on the playlist, and yeah, I don't think at this point there are any songs on it that I really don't like. There are
Mhm.
songs I like more than others.
Hmm.
And then life can be hard. That seems to be almost the sleeper on this album because when the album first came out, nobody was mentioning it, and now everyone is mentioning it.
Hmm.
And it is just a beautiful, beautiful song, you know. And but the rest too, I mean, We Too, I really like.
Hmm.
Mountaintop, I mean, has every one of these songs has some aspects of it. There's so much going on.
Hmm.
And that's why, I don't really think of it so much in terms of his other albums. I really can't compare it to his other albums because every one of his albums is a different thing
Hmm.
and is itself. It's a closed world. There are little connections sometimes, when a song will remind you of something else on a previous album, but his approach to every album he does is a little different, and he maintains it through the album, not necessarily as a concept album, but it's just every album has its own feel and its own spirit. And this one really kind of was surprising in a way. I mean, the first time I
Mhm.
played it, I thought, okay, this is okay, but the two songs that I really liked the most were Days We Left Behind and Home to Us, because I'd heard those so many
Hmm.
times. And I think this is a thing with Paul, he repeated playing is almost always rewarded with his albums. The 10th time you play it, you like it a hell of a lot more than the first time you played it
Right.
because there's so much to discover, and there's so much there. Um, so that's my feeling about this one. I mean, it seems to have been out too short a time to say it's one of my favorite Paul McCartney albums, but it's
Hmm.
kind of one of my favorite Paul McCartney albums. I mean, there are, and as I've said before, working on the books, I mean, even some of my least favorite Paul McCartney albums, I've now come around to. Like, I could put on Wildlife and play it happily,
Hmm.
Uh, and I used to hate Wildlife. I mean, I seriously disliked Wildlife for a whole lot of reasons. But, you sit there and listen to these songs really closely and you take them apart, you take out your guitar and you play them and listen to track separations and everything that's going on. And you hear a lot of stuff that just didn't strike you at first.
Hmm.
So I've sort of yeah, my books have sort of convinced myself.
That's
Anyway,
why I say opinions can change over time very easily. And
yeah.
it's also why I shy away from first impressions, which
Hmm.
I can't stand. YouTube is got loads of first impressions of Paul's new album where they've
Mhm.
listened twice and they gotta say something. Just wait a while,
Well,
you know?
but that's sort of the nature of the business. I mean, this is an album, so okay, you can listen and listen and listen before you have to say anything. But I mean, I used to go out every night and cover a concert. You don't get to hear it again. That's
Mhm.
it.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I'm used to spot impressions a bit more, but I'm glad with his albums that you don't have to do that because my spot impression is different than as you're saying,
Hmm.
really, that after 10 times, 20 times, whatever,
Hmm.
many times.
Okay. Al, what's your take?
I think it's a very solid uh the word Tom used was consistent.
Hmm.
And I think it's the most consistent album he's made since I kind of consider Chaos and Memory Almost Full as like 1 and 1A because they were
Hmm.
recorded so close together.
Right.
So it's certainly the most consistent album he's made since those two albums.
Right.
Uh, which is 20 years ago,
Hmm.
and but it's very, very solid. I would give it a 8.5 on a 10 scale.
Okay. Are there songs on this album that you would rate, classic, possibly, even though it's
No,
still soon?
because as this is being recorded, the album's been out 3 weeks.
Right.
You can't say in 3 weeks such and such a song is a classic, or some of these reviews that you even mentioned on YouTube. It's a great album. It's a masterpiece. You can't figure on how great an album is in 3 weeks.
Right.
You know,
That's true.
that's why you're waiting.
Yeah. Well, I'm not going to use the word masterpiece unless an album's been out for at least half a year,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, or a year, but that's me.
Yeah.
So doesn't that imply that in say 4 or 5 months you might decide that you know what, it's really not that good?
It's possible, but that never
Yeah.
happens with me.
It's
It seems a little unlikely, you know.
mhm.
No, but I could like something more, or there are certain songs that I didn't care for that I suddenly like. The one I always bring up in all my podcasts is with Flowers in the Dirt. I could not listen to Don't Be Careless Love.
Hmm,
Mhm.
I
really?
couldn't get into that song. It was so
Huh.
weird. And then after a while, I couldn't get that song out of my head. So even if, there's that one song that sticks out there like you really don't like it, you just never know,
Yeah.
you
I
know?
mean, I mean, these guys can, um, you know, they know that back in '89 when the Flowers in the Dirt came out,
Uh-huh.
I gave it a very bad review in Beatlefan,
Uh-huh.
and now I think it's in the upper tier of his solo work.
But would you
So,
Right.
consider Biker Like an Icon an iconic Paul song?
No.
That's off
no,
the ground. That's from off the
that's
ground,
I
true.
to be
know, but
clear.
An
it's
iconic
we're talking
Paulson.
about, going back and you use the word iconic.
Yeah.
No, but I do think My Brave Face and this
Yeah.
one and Distractions and
Mm-hmm.
That Day Is
That
Done.
Day Is Done and Motor of
Uh,
Love.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
okay.
Yeah.
They're
Mhm.
Yeah, those
beautiful
those
songs.
are among the finest of his solo career, to me anyway.
Yeah.
Bruce?
Yeah, I think Paul sometimes doesn't pick the right songs for singles or previews, and he did on this one.
Hmm.
I think Home, to Us was great. Days We Left Behind was great. And sneaking those out ahead of time really made me want to hear the rest of the album.
Hmm.
And I think I have the same amount of anticipation for this one that I did for, say, albums like Band on the Run. To me, it was like, oh, I'm back in the, 70s when I'm excited about, the next release again.
Hmm.
Because
Mm-hmm.
for a while, I didn't have that same excitement about it. Not because the albums didn't turn out to be that good. I mean, I love that Fireman album that came out, and I'm like, whoa, what's this?
Hmm.
But this one I had high expectations for from hearing the two preview tracks, and it didn't let me down when I played it. I played it a couple of times before I sat down and did a review for my website, and it to me was just a solid album. It's one of those where, when you were a kid, you used to say, "There's not a single song where I would have to get off the up the chair, lift the needle,"
Mm.
Hmm.
or in the CD age to push the button to the next one, or I don't know what you do in the streaming age,
Right.
but there wasn't a
Mm.
single track on it that I just cringed and went, "Oh man, how did Paul let that one get out?"
Hmm.
or anything. I just thought it was, like Tom said, consistent, solid album. I liked Down South. I also thought, of course, life can be hard. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's a solid album.
Hmm.
I wasn't expecting it to be this good until I heard the two preview songs. And then I thought, well, the whole album can't be as good as those, but yeah, it can.
Mm-hmm.
Life Can Be Hard to me sounds like a Broadway tune.
Yeah.
Mm.
And
There were a
Home
few
to
songs
Us.
that
Yeah.
reminded me of Wings, and just overall, I just thought once again, solid album, and very very pleased with it. And I don't think I'll change my mind, in a half a year.
Okay, that's you. We're all different. But Home to Us, what did you all think of that? The first true
I don't,
duet? Well, it's like bouncing back and
Mm.
forth with vocal lines.
yeah.
But
I
act
mean,
naturally, Paul and Ringo. Come on.
That's not a duet. They're singing the same time.
yeah,
You
yeah,
know, you have to stand out with solo vocals for it
yeah.
to be a duet.
Yeah, I mean, they've
I,
sung in harmony before.
right.
They've actually
Right.
sung in not quite harmony, that little half step there in Walk With You. But
Hmm.
they've sounded good singing together. You know, Alan brought up Stop and Smell the Roses before. Sure to Fall, one
Mm.
of my favorite songs Ringo did since leaving the Beatles. It's a
Hmm.
beautiful, beautiful record. It's unmistakably Paul and Linda doing the
Hmm.
harmony behind there. Not, but again, not a duet in the strictest sense. It's
Right.
two people singing, but they're doing it at the same time, and in harmony.
I think
The,
that's still a duet.
I mean,
I
yeah,
don't.
Hey, when I was a little kid and, we had piano recitals and I had to play a duet with someone, we were playing in the same time the
Yeah, I
yeah,
whole
agree.
Hmm.
time. That was a duet. So
Yeah.
vocally, it's the same.
Two people singing together is a duet. I don't know.
Yeah.
well, then then it is not their first duet. Let's call it what it is.
The
Right.
first time
I
they
mean,
Yeah, I
trade
don't know.
solo lines.
right. I mean, what goes on? Paul is doing this bluegrassy high harmony
Uh-huh.
Right.
under Ringo. You know,
Yeah.
that's you could say that's a duet as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't look at
Yeah,
it that
and,
way. I
and in,
really
in an
think it
opera,
has to
two
be
singers
solo.
singing together is a duet.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Three is a trio.
We have to
Yeah,
defer to Alan. He's the classical music
that's
expert here.
true.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we bow to Alan then. Okay. I stand corrected. All right.
Not a
So
duet.
a few more things about Paul here. This should be a tough question. Name what you think is the best composition Paul wrote in the Beatles.
Uh,
Best as
Well,
far
since
as
Alan just gave a big sigh, let
Yeah.
him be
yeah.
the first one.
Him first.
How can you even answer that,
Hey, well,
Yeah.
So so I've thought about it because you did mention that you were going to ask that. I don't know
Mhm.
if everyone got that preview question, but
uh-huh.
um so normally I would say here, there, and everywhere because it's got so much
Hmm.
great harmony in it. It's a beautiful melody and all that. But since I always say that, I'll go for Penny Lane this time because Penny Lane is, such a concise little masterpiece. Lyrically, it's very evocative. You're just put right there in Penny Lane. You see all these characters, you see all these places. The
Hmm.
melody's gorgeous, the arrangement is gorgeous. You've got, Dave Mason's great trumpet playing all through it.
Hmm.
In fact, I would probably say, just to be even more perverse, Penny Lane with the trumpet ending.
Dun,
Okay.
dun, 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 dun.
I have to say,
Okay.
since Tom is here, one of the things I really like about Sirius XM is that when they play Penny Lane, you never know which version it's going to
That's
be.
right. Now
That's true.
we
Yeah.
mix it. We
Both.
mix them all up. Yeah, we do that.
Hmm.
We do that. But
Okay.
that can scare me sometimes. Like when I hear "I Feel Fine" or "She's a Woman" from the reverb
The
Yeah.
American
The
thing. So
Capitol
you
version.
never know what you're going to get.
Yeah.
All right, Tom, what would you pick?
We're distinguishing between compositions and records at this point. I mean, my favorite Beatles
Mm.
record that he is the lead vocalist on is "Hey Jude." It's my favorite
Okay.
record slash song of all time. We're
Okay.
talking about a composition, meaning something someone else could that lends itself to interpretation, lends itself to reading the lyrics as a freestanding piece of poetry.
Right.
I would probably go to "Let It Be." Yeah, again, evocative like crazy. Um, and there are so many great interpretations of that, Aretha on down. Um, and it is a wonderful record. I mean, the Beatles recording of it, whichever one you prefer, the single or the album, is masterful. Hey Jude's still probably my favorite song, one to sing along with, right?
Hmm.
Songs must be sung, right, Alan? Um, it's my favorite song. But as a composition, as a piece of work, if I had to sit back and say, that's the one I wish I wrote, that would be it. Let it be.
Hmm.
Excellent answer. Good,
Good.
good. Bruce?
I have to pick Hey Jude. Not only is it's a great sounding record, it's a great song to sing along with. There's just everything about it is so great. And it is a song that meant a lot to me because, believe it or not, there was a time when I was a very kind of shy and timid person, particularly when it came to calling up girls on the phone. And
Uh,
here was Paul saying,
mm,
you have found her, go out and get her. And the song it meant so much to me on so many levels. So I have to pick Hey Jude. And I know Tom will cringe when I mention this one, but I'm thinking more of the music in the verses, Tom, is And I Love Her. I think that is a
Oh my
great
God.
song,
Oh my
mm.
God.
absolutely great
Oh
song.
my
I
God.
know Tom doesn't like the middle eight because it contrasts, it shifts the point of view and all that other good stuff, but I think it's a beautiful song. It's beautifully played. The fun thing I like about it is, George's guitar work on that is so excellent. And
Hmm.
then when the George Martin Orchestra does it, this lush arrangement, and they have a professional studio musician playing it, and it just sounds boring the way he plays the guitar compared to the way George does.
Hmm.
So to me, it's a great love song, and I know Tom. Sorry, Tom, I've got to put that one right up there with Here, There, and Everywhere. Great stuff yesterday, but Hey Jude's my favorite.
Okay. Al, your turn.
No question, here, there, and everywhere, both the recording and the song. I mean, the recording is just so exquisite. I think we've talked about this in the past that it's his vocal is so great. George's little single chord fills.
Hmm.
It's just what was it? I guess in 22 when the Revolver box came out. Uh, one of us had gotten a an advance of the remixed Revolver,
Hmm.
and a bunch of us were able to hear it at the Chicago Fest, and I was I became a puddle when I heard that that mix of Here, There, and Everywhere. It's just exquisite, but also as a song, it's there are Emmylou Harris's cover
Mm.
version of
Very
Here, There,
nice.
and Everywhere is absolutely just, again, exquisite. And there are, many others. It's probably, and also, let's face it, it's Paul himself has said that it's one of his, certainly of his Beatles material, perhaps his favorite song.
I know he said that on numerous occasions, and you would think
Yeah.
he would say yesterday,
Yeah.
considering the fact that it's the most covered song probably ever, like
Uh,
4,000 versions of yesterday. But
mhm.
yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah.
I
And
would
that's
go
the
with,
harmony on that is
yeah.
just so
Yes.
incredible on that.
Oh
I mean,
God.
look, beyond Paul, John cited it as one of his
Yeah.
favorites of
Mm.
Paul's, as did George Martin. Somewhere where where there's smoke, there's fire here.
Yeah.
As did Al Sussman. Come
Right.
on.
Okay. And I would pick Hey Jude, probably because it's one of the greatest vocal performances ever from Paul McCartney, especially the screaming at the end, the whole feeling of universality, shall I say it, unity in the world. And I love all the Nana Hey Heys and just love the whole sound of the record and Paul's delivery,
Mhm.
his vocal delivery. It's just amazing. But
You've
Mhm.
then there's
got
so many
Ballad
great
Paul.
ones. Hmm?
Yeah, Ballad Paul and Shouter Paul in one song.
That's right.
Mm.
Yeah, good point. Okay, now we got to do the same thing for his solo career. Okay, who should
Okay.
go first? Um, let's make it Bruce this time.
Okay.
I'm just going to say maybe I'm amazed.
Hmm.
When I got the McCartney album when that track came on, I was truly amazed by it. I thought it was great. And, to me, that was for a solo career. I don't think he's topped it yet. And there are a lot of great songs that followed it, a lot of great songs, but maybe I'm Amazed has always stuck with me as just a great track.
I just read a new list of Paul's best songs in his career, and that one was ranked number one. A lot of people say that. Tom?
As a an individual song, I'm probably in the maybe I'm amazed camp. As a record, I prefer the live version with Wings. I like it as a better record. If we're talking about our favorite McCartney record, I would go with maybe I'm amazed Wings version asterisk.
Okay. And the reason being?
Well, that one, I mean, for all the right reasons, I knew it as as the studio version for several years, right? Like
Mhm.
like everybody did. Um, but it always stood out as, and every Beatle album had them too. That one should have been a single element.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I wasn't the only one saying that for sure.
Right.
And I think when it landed as a single with Wings Over America, that was the album for my high school years, 76 to 80. You can go do the math later. But when that one came, that was our album for 4 years, and that's the one that led the way, and it fit perfectly, and it was absolutely the right song to pick as a single from that album. We didn't need a
Hmm.
live version of, I don't know, Band on the Run to be the single. Okay, this was a single that was 6 years overdue at that point, and getting it on a 45 and it being the focal point of that album really was very gratifying. It really, paved the way for enjoying the rest of that album for me.
Okay. I have to admit that whenever I listen to the radio, um, I always hear the studio version these days more than the live one. I don't know how it is on the Beatles channel, but do
And
you
we play
think
them
that,
both. I mean,
I know,
yeah.
but do you think the live version is what helped to make it the classic that it was?
Well,
Or what?
no, I
Yeah.
think it had gotten classic status prior
Yeah.
to,
Hmm.
but that cemented it as I think maybe as a radio fixture. Okay. I mean, yeah, the Studio One got plenty of radio airplay, certainly FM wise.
Hmm.
Not sure how much AM back in the day, but this one clearly fit on both bands, AM and FM, and has stuck around. I think enough people heard it and said, I mean, and I think it's just a better record. He sings it a little bit more disciplined. McCulloch's guitar playing is nothing shy of brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Hmm.
And Wings, let's face it, could do no wrong at that point. It was a total home run.
Okay. Alan.
Okay, as you know, normally I choose back seat of my car because that was one
Huh.
of a big discovery for me in working on Volume One. Just how incredible that song is. But to be perverse, I'm going to choose a different one, which is No More Lonely Nights.
Huh.
It doesn't get spoken of very much. The film it's in is often maligned, but it is, I think, one of the high points of the film, and it's a gorgeous song. It's got a great solo by David Gilmour. I think it deserves more attention than it gets. There are several different versions and mixes of it out there to choose from. And we've actually found some surprising stuff about it for Volume 3, which I can't divulge. So it's yeah, so it's been on my mind a lot lately, and it's just it. I've always liked it, and now hearing it again a bit more than I have in the last, well, since it came out,
Hmm.
uh, it's found its place again. I think it really deserves to be heard more.
I think it's a great one.
It is.
Notice how Alan has learned the art of the tease in
Yes.
plugging the next book.
Yes,
Now we got to
it's
wait and find out
I've
what
come
tease was
so
good.
far from the days when in supposedly promoting my fight in Beatles book at Beatlefest, and they asked me on a panel, so Alan Kozinn, why should people buy your book? And I said they should buy my book if they want to buy my book, and not buy my book if they don't want to buy my book. And a friend of mine out in the
Whatever will
audience
please
actually
them.
face palmed.
Whatever will please them, I'll do it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Alan's agents going, no, no, no.
Yeah.
But
But no,
that song,
we're finding a lot of great stuff, and some of it
Yeah.
is about No More Lonely Nights.
what I love, not only the song, but David Gilmour's playing, not only in the solo, but the way the song ends. I
Mm.
could go on
Mhm.
for, I wish there were 10 more minutes of him playing at the end and just
Mhm.
jamming. It's so fantastic. All right, Al.
I actually was leaning toward No More Lonely Nights, but
Mm.
I think I'm gonna still go with Bruce and Tom and say maybe I'm amazed because it's it's especially the studio version is it's a great record, and it's again one of those songs that has been adapted well by other artists.
Hmm.
It was only within, I guess maybe a couple of years after it came out that Rod Stewart recorded it with Faces.
Hmm.
Mm.
And of course, there have been, I mean, numerous other versions of it over the years.
I
Right.
was there the
Yeah.
night he did that
Oh, really? At the
at the
Garden?
Fillmore. Yeah.
Ah, at the Fillmore.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So you like the studio version more than the live?
Yeah, well, I mean, the live version is fine, but I suppose I have maybe a sentimental attachment to the studio version because that was, especially in the early years there of FM progressive rock radio, that was a staple.
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah. I like the studio version better myself
Hmm.
because I do think Paul's vocals are great on both versions,
Yeah.
but I love the way the song ends in the studio, like in suspension.
Yes.
That's a
Hmm.
really cool ending,
Yeah, it's a cool
which,
record for
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. My choices, I've always said this, even back in my DHA days, 1985 and a tie with Only Love Remains.
Mm.
Two great songs
Oh.
right there. I never get enough of 1985. I'm so happy that he brought her into his set list many years ago. It's
Mm.
such a great album closer. It's so damn catchy, the whole piano part. And
Mm.
Only Love Remains is one of his greatest love songs in his solo career. And he's done a lot of great love songs. And I wish more
Hmm.
people would be familiar with
Mm.
that one.
Yeah,
Okay.
we don't call them silly love songs anymore, do we?
I
No.
don't think it matters at all to Paul because he had the last laugh there. He had a
That's for
number one
sure.
record for 5 weeks
Yeah.
with Silly Love
But
Number
Songs.
one record of the year in Billboard, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. That is right. You are
talk to
correct,
us
sir.
in a year, and one of us might choose Life Can Be Hard.
I tell you,
It's possible. It is
that's a
possible.
beauty, that thing. That is a
Uh,
beauty.
I don't think any of us would pick like Bip Bop, right?
No.
No,
Probably
Okay.
not.
no.
All
Uh-uh.
right. So, last question here. If you could take one McCartney album for a desert island disc, what would it be?
Do you need
One
me
that
to
you
stick
would
around for this? Do you need me to stick around for this one or
Yeah.
no?
you could just answer first and leave if you want. We did a whole show on this with
I know
Tom
we
as to
did.
why you can say what your favorite McCartney album. It's he not only says it's Paul's best album, it's the best solo Beatle album.
In my humble opinion.
Okay.
In my humble opinion. Yes.
Tom, for those that don't know you, why don't you
Uh,
say the name of the album?
Yes,
that
that
would
would help.
be Tug of War from 1982. From the day I heard it. Apropos of Alan's comments before, the first time, the 10th time, First time out of the gate, they had to pick me up off the floor. I listened to it end to end and
Mhm.
said, this is his best record, without any hesitation. And I mean, and the thing is, a lot of people who know the record love it, of course. People who don't know it, who might only be vaguely familiar with it, even might say, "Oh, is that the one with Ebony and Ivory?" And I tell them, "Yes, it's the one with the most successful solo Beatles single. Yes, it is that
Mm.
one." Um, End to end. I mean, I did a full interview with Paul. That was the bringing everything full circle. We went track by track. And, even the stories he told behind, even the stories, especially the stories he told behind it, enhanced my appreciation for it more. But there's so much Beatleness to it. I mean, you don't even have to hear the album. Just look at the notes and you say, okay, he's written a song about John. He's got Ringo drumming on it. He's got George Martin and Jeff Emmerich, as the engineering and production team. It's got a lot going for it before you even drop the needle. Um, the songs are well written. A lot of discretion and judgment went into it. I mean, there was enough material there for a double album. And, working with George, and as Paul, described it, he said if that double album would have been really, really good, a single album was going to be even better. And that's what
Mhm.
they settled on. And some of the stories behind the songs that Paul shared in our sit down made me love it even more. Like even things like ballroom dancing, which is probably call it the rock track on the album. When he ever told the stories about, him and George going to dances, in Liverpool, and it's kind of a visual song, I guess, helped out quite a bit by Give My Regards to Broad Street, seeing, the dancers and, the whole big thing. When he started telling stories, now George was called into the album. He says, "Oh yeah, we used to go to this place where George's parents were the lead dancers, like at some social club." I never knew that.
Uh,
And just by telling that story, it added another layer of, I'll use the term Beatleness to the proceedings. And that didn't hurt for sure. And he told stories that brought a lot of people into it. Brian Epstein, right, is even brought into this through the song "Take It Away," another top 10
mm,
hit. And I'd asked him about John Hurt and the video, and he said, yeah, when we came up with the concept about a manager, it reminded me, that Brian took us to see John Hurt in this play, back in the 60s to go see Little Malcolm and his struggle against the eunuchs. And when we said this was going to be the concept of the video, if I needed a manager and a link to that story, it was going to be John Hurt. So
mhm,
now we've got Brian in the story,
mm.
the album end to end. And of course, the first two songs segueing one into the next, my how original. When you ever do that before? So it had so many Beatle tricks. And of course, now having George there to do string arrangements, things like the end of Tug of War, and
Mhm.
certainly Here Today,
Mm.
to me it stood up, as good as his work he did, at any point in his career, including the Beatles. It's solid end to end. The songs are well written, and you know what? Throw Carl Perkins into the mix. That doesn't hurt either.
Hmm.
I
And
remember,
Stevie Wonder.
and Stevie Wonder, and of course,
Mhm.
look, he brought in all the big guns. Steve Gadd, right, is on that.
Stanley Clark.
Stanley Clark. I mean, there was no room for error here. Remember, John had passed, in December of 80. This is the next album he makes. He's turning 40. A lot of things are happening in his life at that point that will put this album under the microscope.
Hmm.
Okay. He's got the loss of John. He's got the breakup of Wings. He's turning 40. There's a lot of pressure right there for him. This album is going to be under the microscope. It just is.
Hmm.
And he came through in spades.
Yeah, you talk about George Martin and the string arrangements. How about all the brass stuff? on
Yeah.
that album
Hmm.
from, well, Wanderlust,
Yeah.
both
Wanderlust,
classic
yeah.
and
Sure.
Ballroom Dancing and Take It Away.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
how he needed George there for that record, for those records to sound as good as they did, for those songs to be cut into the vinyl the way they were. He needed to have George Martin there, and that's a good thing, you know.
hmm
Um, there was too much to like on that album for me.
Okay. Well, when that album came out, it became my favorite McCartney album.
Hmm.
But since then, there are others that I like more. But that's the problem. He's given us so many
It's
great
a good
albums.
problem to have.
Mhm.
Like when people say, you mean to say you like that album better than Band on the Run? And I say yes. And I always tell them, you know what the problem, what's wrong with Band on the Run? Absolutely nothing. Okay. Absolutely nothing. He's allowed to make more than one monster, brilliant, use all the adjectives you want.
Uh,
He's allowed to make more than one, and he sure has.
And that's the segue to me because my favorite Paul album is Band on the Run. That'd
Yeah.
be the one I would take with me. A couple of songs, of course, the album Ender we've already praised and all, but to me, Band on the Run with that thing of just the freedom of escape on that opening track.
mhm.
And I'll never forget, I'd finished whatever year it was in school, finished the last exam, and I get in my car and I turn the car on, and right on the radio is beginning a Band on the Run. And I'm escaping from a year in college, and there's Band on the Run. And and then also I had a wonderful grandfather who was an attorney, inspired me to be an attorney. His ethics were on a scale of 1 to 10 and 11, just like Spinal Tap. And when he would get tired on something, he would go, "Hey ho." So of course, when I heard "Hey ho," it was
What a
that did it
coincidence.
for me right there. I said, "This is my favorite Paul album of all time," and I've liked a lot of stuff he's done afterwards, but to me, Band on the Rum is my favorite Desert Island Paul album. Period.
See, Paul knew all this
Mm.
before he recorded it about your
Yeah, he
grandfather
said
and
there's a guy in New Orleans whose grandfather went "Hey ho," and just for him, Alan, I'm surprised you didn't have that in your book.
Hmm.
Yeah, it
When
got
it
cut
gets
out by
updated.
the editor. It's always okay to blame an editor.
Okay, let's go to Al.
I would have to say Red Rose Speedway.
Mm.
Wow.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's um it's in fact just over this past weekend I heard the Hold Me Tight medley, from
hmm
side two, on Terry Hemmert's Breakfast with the Beatles in Chicago. And it reminded me of just how much I like that album.
Mhm.
Even though the lyrics of many of the songs are, shall we say, minimalist
Hmm.
or
Mm.
simple,
Yeah.
the melodies
Mm.
through consistently through that whole
Yeah.
album are
Right.
just exquisite.
Mhm.
And I mean, just a song like Little Lamb Dragonfly, which I realize, Alan, is
Beautiful.
not specifically from the Red Rose Speedway sessions,
But it's on the Red Rose Speedway album.
but it's
Yep.
on the album,
You know,
exactly.
Al,
Yeah.
that song, Little Lamb Dragonfly, it's interesting you point that one out. Last night on our live Fab Forum, we had Andy Leach, the guy who put together the Wings
Hmm.
exhibit at the Hall of Fame. And
Right.
as we do, we always ask our guest, you know, pick a song to go out with. And
Right.
of the entire Wings catalog, Little Lamb Dragonfly.
Hmm.
Hmm.
You never
I
know.
think
I mean,
Great song.
look,
Yeah.
Mhm.
I remember reviewing the album and I gave it a favorable review, but my comment was that when listening to the album, I was reminded more of Red Roses than a Speedway.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
I kind of was looking for a Speedway.
Well, that the whole flavor of the album for me always was it was a very important record because
Yeah.
if it wasn't there, you're going from Wildlife to Band on the Run in one step. No one would have
Right.
believed it.
Yeah.
No,
Exactly.
it wouldn't have gotten the credibility. It was
Right.
Yeah.
it was a solid record. Yeah, look, I like some songs more than others. I've always said side one of Red Rose is one of my favorite sides. Cut
Yes.
for cut. I mean,
Mhm.
Hmm.
great stuff.
Yeah. It's as in my opinion, it's the first really solid album
Hmm.
in his post Beatles career. Because I'm not a big fan of any of the first three.
Hmm.
I feel that they're both all three of them are half a good album or half an
Mhm.
album worthy of Paul McCartney. Red Rose Speedway was solid.
I think
Mhm.
Red Rose
Okay.
Speedway is half a good album because it should have been the double album that
Mm.
So
Yeah, I
what?
was going to
I
ask
thought
you
there
that,
was going to
Alan.
be no math. What is this, like a
Right.
an album now? What the hell are we talking about? Yeah.
Yeah, I
No, but
wonder what would have happened had it been a double album. It probably wouldn't have sold as many copies for one thing,
No,
but
sure.
I think I would have been reminded more of the Speedway than the Red Roses had it been a double album.
yeah. I
Right.
mean, when he put out the archival box and it came
Right.
a version of the double album, I thought it worked so much better than it worked as a single
Yeah.
album.
Yeah, me too.
And there was a point to the double album of showing everybody in Wings off, and that sort of went by the wayside when it became a single album. So I kind of wish that was released as a double album.
mm.
Blame Capital.
Yeah, of course.
Well, I must say that Little Lamb Dragonfly is one of my all-time favorite songs from Paul. It is absolutely stunning,
Hmm.
so beautiful, so gorgeous, and like, all these different sections that flow together so well, like effortlessly.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, but there are going to be a lot of people watching this right now who are going to say, especially because a lot of people point to Ram as his best album now.
Mm.
Why don't you feel that way? Just your
No,
opinion.
it's just it's just never gelled for me. There's too many songs, too many little things like, Eat at Home and well, Dear Boy, I've over the years I've warmed up to Dear Boy, but there are, a few other things that are just that I just to me they're just not worthy of the greatest pop songwriter of the second half of the 20th century and the first quarter of this one. you know
Okay.
I mean it's okay, but I I just probably have a basic disagreement with, oh, I know Bill King disagrees with me on
Mm.
that,
Well,
but
he's a big fan of Ram.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our VP, Lou Simon at the Beatles channel,
Hmm.
only his favorite Paul album, not only his favorite solo Beatle album, it is his favorite album of all time by anyone, anytime, anywhere.
Oh,
That's a mouthful.
That is
That is a mouthful.
that.
yeah. I know my experience. I didn't particularly know what to think of it when it first came out. And where I really fell in love with the album was when I was doing my, Beatles on Apple solo book. And I interviewed Denny Sywell, and
Hmm.
we went through song by song, and I gained a much greater appreciation for the album and gave it another listen. I was like, damn, this thing's a lot better than I remember it being.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I will
But I
say
wouldn't
that
make
I
it my
think,
favorite Paul album.
yeah, the problem with Ram for me is that it's a great album, but he's made at least 10 great albums that I would consider truly great.
Mhm.
And but his vocals on Ram are off the charts. I mean, his vocals on Monkberry Moon Delight. When has he ever screamed continuously for 5.5 minutes on a record? You either love the song or you don't. The ending of Backseat of My Car, his vocals there is just amazing. You know, it's such a big climax,
Mm.
such a way to end the song. Um, and there's tremendous variety on there. Dear Boy has a very Beach Boys quality to it.
Mhm.
Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey is, to me, a masterpiece.
Of course. Yeah.
Too many
Sure.
people. I mean, it's a lot of great stuff on there. Eat at Home is very Buddy Holly-esque to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's a great album. Alan, you are last.
Appropriately
Um,
so. The
so
McCartney X.
I assume I can't pick pure McCartney because
No, no compilations.
which, as a release, it's means nothing to me, but if I have to go to a desert island, I want as much as possible, and that's like a 4 disc set.
Hmm.
So I don't know, man. Uh
You got to pick one.
I
Come
think
on, you're the author of McCartney Legacy here.
Right.
This
that's
shouldn't be
what
a
makes it
struggle for
so
you.
hard.
No pressure.
Yeah.
Alan, the plane is about to crash, and you're going off to the island. Grab one album. That's all the
Right.
stewardess
Hmm.
will let you take.
It's gonna
One album.
be it's gonna be either Back to the Egg or Flowers in the Dirt, probably. And let's see. Let's go with Flowers in the Dirt because we just had Lawrence Juber on things we said today, so we gave a lot of love to Back to the Egg. So uh,
Your
so
reasoning is this, it doesn't make
what?
sense. It
He's a
doesn't make
great
any.
politician.
Okay, fine.
But Flowers in the Dirt. Uh, I really thought that the collaboration with Elvis Costello, should have continued more than it did. I thought it was
Mm.
very promising. I thought My Brave Face was just brilliant, which
Hmm.
was
Yes.
the first thing that any of us heard from that album.
Right.
Um, and then the B-side, Flying to My Home, but don't understand why
Mm.
that didn't end up on the album
Right.
Mhm.
instead
No.
of, say, Où est le soleil. Um,
Yes.
but and so there are some things like Oulé Soleil on there that I could live without. But on the other
Hmm.
hand, I've even gotten used to Oulé Le Soleil because the video is kind of it's almost convincing because it's like a video game, and the music seems to go with that
Hmm.
idea. But I'm not a dance music kind of guy,
Mm.
so that's why listen. But I understand that there are people who are, and so fine. There's that component on that album. But My Brave Face, the other Costello collaborations, including Don't Be Careless Love, uh, I thought all of those were really well done, and
Mm.
there were personal things like Put It There, comes with the story with his father and all that, but it's kind of a nice song. Figure of Eight, was his concert opener on the '89
Hmm.
tour,
Hmm.
so you
Yeah.
heard that a lot, and um, but also Flowers in the Dirt was just for me personally. It probably wasn't the first record of his I ever reviewed because I think that might have been Tug of War on CD for Beatlefan.
Hmm.
Yes.
Yeah, but it was the first one I reviewed for the Times, and the review was kind of an accident because what we wanted to do was an interview, but we couldn't pin him down for an interview. So they said, "Why don't you just review the record?" So I did, and so I felt, I got kind of close to it, in the same way I was talking about before, listening to it so many times,
Hmm.
to have something to write and, getting more and more into all of the songs. And also, it's going to be the last album in Volume 3 of McCartney Legacy.
Mm.
Plug number two by Alan Kozinn tonight. Well done.
Not to mention they're sitting right here. But
Well done.
but
You've
yeah,
learned.
but especially, opening with My Brave Face, that's just a brilliant move, and the song
Hmm.
is so good. The video for the song is so
Mhm.
good too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
We and now there's like a little bit of a sequel because now he gets this bass back.
Hmm.
Right.
So I think the bass shown in the video obviously isn't that bass because he didn't have it. But it
Mhm.
was a bass he used. I think it's still at the set list on it.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So, but anyway, yeah, there's something about Flowers in the Dirt and the whole atmosphere of the time, the fact that he's going to get back on tour. This is the record
Hmm.
he's going to go back on tour promoting, and it just was a great time and a great album, and uh, most everything about it I like, even Où Le Soleil these days. Coming around to, but I would have put Flying to My Home on instead. Maybe not as powerful a closer as Où Le Soleil. I kind of understand why that's there as a closer. Flying to My Home wouldn't have been the closer, I don't think, but it probably should have been on the album because it's a great track.
Hmm. It could have worked in the middle of the album.
Yeah.
Flying to My Home has a lot of Ram quality to it, I think. Very
Mhm.
quirky,
Yeah.
odd vocals, you know. But like you, Alan, my pick is Flowers in the Dirt because it's my favorite McCartney album. I
Hmm.
never, ever get tired of hearing it. I can listen to it so many days in a row and never tire of it. And I love all the variety on there. Like you, I like the collaboration with Elvis Costello. My Brave Face is brilliant. That Day Is Done is one of my favorite.
Yeah,
You
Mm.
know, if you talk
great.
about it's got a real gospel feel to it,
Yeah,
kind of like Let It Be in a
yeah.
way.
Mm.
Um, I love this one, which I think is a
Oh
perfect pop
yeah.
song.
Hmm.
Figure of Eight was a great concert opener, but I think it worked better as a live performance than the studio version, which is kind of tepid for me.
Well,
But it's
even
still a
the single version with the guitar solo added a
yeah.
lot to it.
Hmm.
That was that Bob Clearmountain, I think, did the mixing for that.
Might have been, yeah,
Yeah, but that was a better version than the one that's on the album.
yeah.
But
True.
yeah, you one or two I like, although it's kind of like another version of The Girl Is Mine,
Mm.
only just with Elvis Costello in there.
Mm.
Distractions is gorgeous.
Yeah.
We Got Married has got that jazz feel to it. That worked really well as a live song.
Yeah.
And I do like Où Le Soleil. Sorry,
Uh,
Alan. Although you're coming
well,
around.
Ken,
Uh,
with distractions, I know this will drive Bruce crazy. He won't get his sleep tonight, but with butterflies buzzing around his head,
yeah.
they don't buzz, right? I'm just saying.
Okay.
I'm
Okay.
just saying.
What's
They
the line in
flutter
Live and Let
by.
Die that everybody corrects? But in this ever-changing world in which we live, and there's something grammatically wrong with that.
Well, no, that's
Yeah,
because
you're not supposed to
a
end the
lot of
sentence
people
with the
mishear it.
preposition.
Okay.
They
Mm.
Big deal.
mishear it. It's in this ever-changing world in
Right.
which we're living. That's
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
but
but it isn't. It isn't. It isn't.
yeah, but then he sings it.
That's what it should be.
It sure sounds like he says "in" four times in this ever-changing world in which we're living. It sure sounds like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was convinced because I want him to be grammatically correct that it's
Right.
ever-changing world in which we're living, but the published sheet music from the time has in which we live in.
Hmm.
And there are certain, I think isn't there a demo?
Hmm.
There are some recordings where you listen to the vocal soloed and he's saying in which we live in. And he was asked about it
Hmm.
and he claimed he didn't remember. But I think that's because he knows that he said in which we live in. Adrian and I argued about that all through the
Mm.
writing of the first volume because I really
That's
didn't.
why the book took so long to do, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really
Right.
I wanted him to be grammatically correct there, but Adrian finally convinced me that the recordings don't really bear it out.
Hmm.
Okay, but why is it important in a song to be grammatically correct? It's the
It's
feel of it.
not. It's not.
Yeah.
Well, because
Well, as long as it makes sense. Like there are a couple,
Yeah.
Bruce, we've been down the list, and you mentioned
Yes.
one earlier that just makes no sense,
Yeah.
I
but
mean, I even argued that listen, sheet music is wrong all the
oh
time.
yeah, I've got sheet music with the wrong authors on it.
Yep.
Mhm.
My ears hear this ever-changing world in which we live in, and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to close with one thing here that drives me crazy, kind of similar to what we're going through right now. Maybe I'm amazed. I've looked online, I've looked at sheet music. The opening line in some sources says, Baby, I'm amazed. You listen to the studio version, Sounds like he's singing Baby I'm Amazed. You listen to Wings Over America, he's saying Maybe I'm Amazed.
Maybe all the way, yeah, on the Wings
Yeah.
over America.
So which is it?
I think it's what you just said. I think he sings Baby I'm Amazed on the studio and
Right.
maybe on the live. That's how I hear him.
Huh.
So which is the one that counts? What's the
The
correct
titles,
lyrics?
maybe I'm amazed. So,
Yeah.
Mm.
Okay, but it's these little things drive me crazy.
but something like that, I think it could have been wordplay where he's singing it one way one time, one way another, and that's fine. It works either
Yeah,
way.
possible.
Okay. All right. Well, this has been tremendous fun. I hope you all
Yeah.
enjoyed this with
Yes.
the
Sure.
tough questions
Mm.
and talking
We
about
kept it
Paul.
to we kept it to about an hour, like you said we would.
Yeah.
I'm kind of influenced by Peter
Oops.
Jackson these days. I don't know.
Oops. Yeah.
Yeah, really.
But why don't we go around the horn and tell everybody what you've all been up to? We'll save Tom for last because he's going to be the longest,
Mm,
I think.
mm.
Bruce, well, you're taking a vacation, like you said.
Yeah, it's not like I'm not thinking about the Beatles or doing things. I'm actually working on a particular Beatles project that I'm not at liberty to discuss. And hopefully at some point in time, I will be at liberty to discuss because that will mean it happened. If it doesn't happen, it didn't happen. But I'm putting a lot of energy in that and it's a lot of fun.
Okay, very good.
Plus,
And,
he,
go to my
plus,
website, Beatle.net, buy the books if you haven't already got them.
That's
Alan's
right.
Mhm.
plugged his books twice. I had to do it at least once.
Okay, and you're always writing for Beatlefan.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, Al.
Um, right now, I just the new issue is Beatlefan is just about to come out, and I have actually two pieces in there. One is kind of a memory bank piece on my memories of seeing Wings at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum
Mm.
Uh-huh.
on May 21st, 1976. It's part of basically a package of people's memories of the tour. And then the other piece I've got is one that I'd been struggling with. And then when the announcement was made of the new executive team at Apple,
Uh-huh.
it's basically a piece on, you know, basically what the future may hold for Apple and for Beatles fandom as well. And then also, I just sent in um, just last night a piece that will be in the issue that will be covered, the August issue that will be covering Revolver. I've done so many Revolver pieces that I figured to do something different. So I came up with a list of what I call pardon me, Baker's dozen, 13 great albums from 1966, because 66 was really the year of the kind of the year that the what we would know as the classic rock album kind of came of age.
Hmm.
So, you're talking Revolver, Pet Sounds,
Right.
Blonde on Blonde,
Mm.
the Kinks, Face to Face,
That's a good
the,
album.
the first Mamas and Papas album, Hums of the Lovin' Spoonful, even Otis Redding's Dictionary of Soul,
Okay.
et cetera.
That's sounds interesting, all this stuff.
Yeah,
We still have to do a show. I mean, we talked about this about 1965, how you think that's the greatest year ever in
yeah,
music. But hopefully we'll get to that.
yeah,
See, I'm saying this now, so that way I'm committed to doing it.
sure.
All right, Alan.
Okay, so Adrian and I are working on volume three. That becomes my third plug for
Yeah, he's learning.
I've also got some things, since we've been talking about Beatlefan things. I've got two pieces for Bill due eventually for the October issue. I'm doing the George Martin scores, which
Oh,
would
yeah.
have done them already, but they're not out. You can't get
Hmm.
Yeah.
and can't get in advance of it either because they're being imported from where they're being printed, and so they're not here yet. But they're coming soon. And by the way, about those scores, the Curve Bender guys, Brian Kehoe and Ryan, what's his name?
Uh,
Kevin
uh,
Ryan.
yeah.
Um, uh, have put out a couple of videos. You can look for them on YouTube. Just search for, George Martin scores. One of them is a great overview of the scores. And the second one they did is why A Day in the Life, the score of A Day in the Life tells you a whole lot that you don't get from hearing the record.
Mm.
Because
Wow.
they're pitching these scores as something that, you don't have to really read music to be able to get a lot out of because they'll also have essays pointing these things out and stuff. So I'm reviewing that for Bill whenever I can get my hands on it. And then for December, I've got to do something about Wings Over America. And I'm not
Mm.
entirely sure. Actually, I have to ask him whether he means Wings Over America as such or the Wings Over America album. I can probably do them both rolled into one. And the big challenge, for me writing for Bill these days is to make a piece that is a single issue piece. Because
Mhm.
Hmm.
everything I've done for him lately has like spread over two
Yeah.
issues.
Yes.
Yeah,
And
I've got
he's been
that
very
one.
indulgent.
Yeah.
Most of my
Uh,
editors say, Alan, give us a break.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, Bill's good with that. I have a thing on the butcher cover, which just basically editing down stuff that I did on a very big chapter in my Rubber Soul Revolver book, but that's in two parts. And I think in the next issue, I'm also doing something on Revolver from the American perspective,
Hmm.
what it was like to hear that album in 1966 and wonder why Paul, was so dominant on the album. And while John only had two songs on the album, did he take the
Right.
session often? It was kind of, who knew?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Tom, you are last.
Okay. Well, I'll keep in the Beatlefan magazine vein first. I just submitted two pieces. They missed the cutoff for the issue that just went in the mail, but I think they're going to be either extras or hauled over for the next issue or both. I don't know. One is a wrap up of the Ringo tour. I
Hmm.
happened to get out to the Greek Theater last weekend, got to see the show and something that we got to hook up with Ringo on, which I'll talk about in just a minute. But also, I have a report in there on there's a museum exhibit at the Broad in Los Angeles, which everyone should go to if you're in the area. It's called Yoko Ono Music of the Mind.
Hmm.
They've done similar exhibits I know here in New York, which I've taken in with everything from her pre-Lennon, the Fluxus movement, the John Cage years, right on through the Bagism and the Acorns and the War Is Over and her solo records. And there's a lot of interactive things. It's really, really terrific. Uh,
Uh-huh.
highly recommend people check that out. So that's
Yeah.
my,
They
yeah,
actually showed it in Chicago too,
yeah,
because Kate
it's,
O'Toole went to go see it, and she was
oh,
raving about it.
it's
Hmm.
terrific. It really is.
Hmm.
They've put together actually an exhibit book with a lot of the things that are in there. If you can't get there, it's worth checking out.
Hmm.
So that takes care of Beatle fan. Now over at the House of Beatles channel, over at Sirius XM, quite a bit going on. I'm involved in five shows, two that I host, two that I co-host, and one that I write. Of the ones that I host, way beyond compare, we do our rarities, and right now we're in the midst of a two-part, in a good Alan Kozinn tradition, a two-part McCartney birthday salute. This week it's live Beatles from the Star Club to the Rooftop, all with Paul out front. Next week it's a look at the 1979 Wings tour. So there's not a lot
Hmm.
out there from that, but
Hmm.
between download cuts and things that have been in the box sets and Campuchia and stuff, we've put together something pretty cool there. Over on Apple Jam, David Frick and I are doing we like to slice and dice this stuff, publishing demos and hits and rarities and whatever we can do. We are doing right now for the month of June, the early Apple, 1968-69. July will be the middle, 70-71, and August will be 72-73. So we're doing kind of a little chronology attack on the Apple. Beyond the Beatles, where we look at all the solo stuff, we go in 5-year blocks. I think this month we're doing 2011 through 15. So coming up in July will be 16 through 20. And we make that one very balanced. 2 songs by each of them. Whether it's from, obviously with John and George, it's going to be material from the vaults that was released during that period.
Right.
From Paul and Ringo, fortunately, we're getting still new material that we focus on there. Across the universe, it's still a weekly show with only one new one per month. So we've dipped into the archive. We have about 150 episodes done. So, not everyone may have heard episode 10, from 3 years ago. And I'm guessing this week we're probably doing the Lennon-McCartney relationship. But the new episode this month was one about John and the various producers he worked with, inspired by the recent passing of Jack Douglas. So it's got everybody from Bert Kaempfert right on up to, Jack Douglas, and then, a little tip of the hat with Jeff Lynne and Giles Martin. You can guess what goes on there. But it'll cover, the different producers over the years. Last night's Fab Forum, which is a live show, but you can catch it on repeat on our app, was all Paul requests, and people came up with beauties. I mean, we had everything from, the usual suspects in Beatleland, right on up to like Wine Dark Open Sea.
Nice.
people were going deep. So it's a good mix, and we had a couple, from the new album. So it was really well done, I think, and having Andy Leach from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame come on to talk about the new exhibit with Wings. He made for a great guest. So check that out if you get a chance. Beyond those 5 shows, things are going on with specials. So we're running right now. I put together something called Man on the Run, which was the easiest jigsaw puzzle I ever did in my life. The book, Man on the Run, is available on CD to public libraries only. It's not for sale. And what makes it interesting is the foreword is read by Paul. So it's in his voice, and it covers everything from going up to the farm to, to Japan in 1980. And it's like 25 minutes of him talking. And there just seem to be convenient pauses where you could put songs in at any time. Then we took the band on the road, using the bus and the whole thing, boom, Hell and Wheels, whatever. It was
It's like
easy
an
to put
open-ended
together.
interview.
Yeah, it almost was. There's no voice on this special other than Paul's. We got a nice waiver to play as much McCartney and Wings music as we can, and it made for a 90-minute special. So it's about 65 minutes of music and 25 minutes of Paul, recalling the Wings days. It's really, really good. I'm working on something that I can't give a lot of details on. It's for George Harrison. We have some big George programming coming up right around November this year, but we want to do things that are evergreen, that can be played on his birthday or whenever. I got a special that I'll tell you more about in a future podcast. Can't really spill the beans on it, but we don't want to leave George out of it. And the big news on the Ringo side was the New York Festival, the International Radio Awards. Our series from last year, Help from His Friends, took home honors in the entertainment music special category. So that was a really big night for us.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I had alluded before to, something special that happened with Ringo this weekend at the Greek. I got to present him with the big statuette, for, best series, and, we had it engraved with his name and everything. The hardest part about it literally was getting it through TSA security. They thought I was carrying a missile.
Yeah.
But we got it there in one piece. He was really, really touched by it. He had He had given us a lot of support for it. He had two conditions to do the series. One, don't leave anybody out. Make sure everyone's in, and we did. Um, and he wanted to be interviewed for it, so we made room for that. But
Oh,
because everyone had to be represented, we needed material from his vaults because not everyone has been on a live album. And about, I think it was a dozen or 13 of the 70 tracks were otherwise unavailable on records. So there was a little something in there for everybody. It was a terrific special. What we're going to do is rebroadcast it, the whole thing, all 12 parts, 12 half-hour episodes, the week of his birthday, July 7th. It'll be 2 a day for 6 days. And it's, of course, available on the Sirius XM app for subscribers. It's there now. You can get all 12 parts and hear that. So that was kind of our big news this past week with Ringo.
Okay.
Other than that, it's been quiet.
That's the thing about Tom. He lives such a dull, boring life.
It just hangs out.
Yeah.
Can I ask you one thing? I don't know how much you can say about this, but you did reveal to us that you did an interview with Ringo going through all of his albums.
Yeah. We did that last May.
Uh-huh.
Covered everything from Stop and Smell from Sentimental Journey right on up through Look Up. Ringo gave us a little over 2 hours to go through this. So we got quite a bit. What I understand they're doing with it, because it'd be kind of hard to play a 2-hour interview straight through. You're going to need to put music in it. And there are, all kinds of regs on digital radio as to how many you can play in and out and things like that. So it's making it difficult to get a full-blown special done. So what we're doing is we're going to be premiering a lot of these during his birthday week coming up, the week of July 7th, is we're going to cut up into what are called ramps. So if we're going to play, I don't know, Stop and Smell the Roses, we have Ringo saying, oh, I remember doing Stop and Smell the Roses with Harry. That was one that we blah, 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 blah. That doesn't mean people won't have a chance to hear it. The payoff here for people who want to hear it is we'll put the entire thing on the app. All 2 hours and 10 minutes of it. We may have to trim it down for, there's little bits of gabbing that, would be, we'll call it not really radio, but there's still probably well over an hour and a half of meat on that bone. So it'll be sliced and diced for radio use. And when you hear Ringo talk about a song, it'll say, that was Ringo talking about Stop and Smell the Roses. Want to hear more? Go hear the whole interview. It's on the app. And then you can hear it in bits and pieces. You want to listen to it 10 minutes at a time or hear the whole thing. It'll all be there on the app.
There you go.
Excellent.
Yep.
Do you have Ringo talking about spooky weirdness?
I have him talking about Rotogravure, and I have him talking about a different form of spooky weirdness, Son of Dracula. Actually, I've played that one on one of the Way Beyond Compare shows. It's a rarities thing, and joint projects and things. And I had a request for Daybreak. Okay,
cool.
Well, that covers 2 Beatles, right? And played it, but I played the version from the album with the whole the intro, with him as the Count and they're talking and blah blah blah. But I also took a little piece of the interview where he talked about, so well, who makes a better, Dracula than a 6-foot-tall blonde guy, right? And he talked about working with Nielsen on that project. So I've played 1 or 2 of the ramps already, but to hear the whole thing in context, it will be on the app.
Okay.
Now, Ken, just one decorating tip for you.
Uh-oh.
You need to rearrange those books and things on the shelf behind you, because right now you've got the Living in the Material World hand, and we don't want to get a Ken is also dead rumor.
Oh, no.
Hand is right above your head.
I'll just go.
And plus, you can see
There you go, right there.
more
That's what I'm
there.
looking at all night going, is it Billy Shears? Who the heck is it?
And he's got Paul's face a few down, and we know, of course, Paul did die in that auto crash.
Oh,
Right. So I
right.
mean, you got
Yes.
the Ken is also dead thing going on there. It's you got to be
Oh,
careful.
Yeah.
We
See,
Yeah.
I
don't
don't
want
even
any
know.
rumors.
I don't know if Alan is aware of this, but you notice I'm always plugging the McCartney Legacy right behind me.
Hmm.
It's right there.
Yeah, I
That's
see
the
it.
Jeez.
Hmm.
You never point that out. It's always there. It's subliminal. Makes people go out and buy the book.
Yep.
One last thing,
I hope
Tom.
so.
I was kind of hoping, did you ever talk to Ringo about Kinky Friedman?
I have talked to him about Kinky Friedman.
You're kidding.
And better yet, I've talked to Kinky Friedman about Ringo. Bless his heart. I mean, look, he's
He's gone.
passed on, but he was a guest of ours on the Fab Forum and found it astonishing that we had that record. I'm like, well, what else would we play tonight with you? As I mentioned before with the guy from the Hall of Fame, we let them pick their song to go out with. I think he was just going to say, well, I don't know, pick a Beatles song, Ticket to Ride, and go out with it. I said, no, we have that record. We got that covered. So, so we did play Men's Room in L.A.
Yeah.
When we had him on the show.
Okay. Ringo plays the voice of Jesus
Yeah.
in there. So
Mhm.
you
It
can always
writes
check it
itself. It writes itself, you know.
Mhm.
All right. Well, guys, this has been absolutely tremendous. This has been a dream team. Thank you so much for doing this. And
Thanks for having us.
yeah,
Yes.
this has been a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
those of you watching this at home or on your phone, if you'd like to see us do more of these tough questions, that kind of an idea, please let us know. And we'll give you all contact information in the description book if you'd like to get in touch with all my guests here. Of course, you can always see Alan and me on things we said today. And Al, Alan, Tom, Bruce, thanks so much for doing this.
Our pleasure.
It's
Thanks for
our
having us.
pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Peace and
Okay.
love.
And thanks to all of you for watching. We'll see you next time.